Liepin and his classmates finally enrolled in the Royal Pioneer Academy, a school for the best students. Before starting, everyone was excited, and Liepin even gave his friends handmade necklaces to celebrate their bond. However, the mood changed quickly during the Ritual of Awakening, where everyone's true powers were revealed. The class leader, Weiss, went first and turned out to be a sage with legendary stats. He acted like a proud leader and called Liepin to the stage, telling everyone how great Liepin was at making things. But when Liepin touched the crystal ball, the result was a total disaster. His occupation was none, and almost all his stats were at the lowest possible level of 1. Worse, they were labeled non-growth, meaning he could never get stronger. The only high stat he had was Dexterity, which everyone considered useless, and his main skill was Jack of all trades, master of none. Seeing this, his friends turned on him instantly. Weiss ripped off the necklace Liepin gave him and crushed it under his shoe. The class strongman Monsoon literally threw Liepin off the stage like trash. To keep their class ranking high, the entire class voted to kick Liepin out. He was sent to the special training class, which was basically a dump for failures. As Liepin sat alone and injured in a corner, a beautiful girl named Manaka approached him. She was a saint and the school's top idol. It turned out they were childhood friends, and Liepin used to protect her from bullies. Manaka didn't care about his stats. She used her legendary healing magic on him for the first time. This caused a massive scene, because the first person a saint heals is supposed to receive a huge blessing and prize money. The students and teachers were shocked and angry that a loser like Liepin got such a precious gift. Manaka's assistants quickly dragged her away, but it was clear she still cared for him. The principal, a greedy man who only cared about money and famous students, ended the ceremony by calling Liepin a rotten egg and promising to crush anyone who didn't make the school look good. Now Liepin is completely on his own in the wild lands surrounding the school. He has no team, no dorm, and no food. Looking at his terrible status screen again, he felt total despair. He was so weak he couldn't even get a basic job. With a heavy heart, he opened his skill tree for Jack of all trades to see if there was any hope left in his useless ability. Liepin discovers he has a unique skill called Skillful Body, which lets him shift his massive dexterity points into other stats like health and strength. He tests it out and suddenly feels his body become incredibly powerful. While he's experimenting, some arrogant students from the castle balcony decide to use him for target practice. One of them, an archer, fires an arrow straight at his head. With his boosted senses, Liepin catches the arrow with his bare hands and throws it back 200 meters with such force that it pins itself into the wall behind the bully. The students are terrified, calling him a monster, but Liepin is just amazed by his new power. He realizes his agility and focus are now on a whole different level. He then uses his skillful career change ability to become a ranger, which instantly gives him all the survival knowledge he needs. He heads into the forest to gather materials, followed by some warrior-class students who mock him for picking up stone. Ignoring them, he crafts a stone knife and a stone axe. Because of his dexterous growth skill, just making these tools causes him to level up instantly, boosting his stats even further. Liepin switches his job to appraiser and realizes his cheap stone axe is actually sharper than a high-quality iron one. He then switches to the woodman job and uses a logging skill to bring down a massive tree in seconds. This catches the attention of 3 warriors who try to bully him into giving up the wood. They think he's an easy target because he's technically unemployed, but Liepin quickly switches his job to axe butler. When the warriors attack, Liepin uses a weapon-breaking skill to shatter their iron axes into pieces with his stone one. The bullies lose their minds in fear and run away after begging for mercy. This victory makes Liepin level up again, unlocking the carpenter job. He decides to build himself a house since his assigned living area is literally a garbage dump in the forest. He builds a heavy-duty cart to move lumber and starts working. Thanks to his high endurance, he doesn't get tired at all. Using his carpentry skills, he puts together a magnificent 2-story house without using a single nail. The final result is a high-quality home that is practically indestructible, leaving him standing in front of a masterpiece he built all by himself in just one day. Manaka and her friends were blown away by the house. It was huge, sturdy, and smelled like fresh wood. Her classmates, Wonsko and Shinobuko, were usually mean to Liepin, but even they had to admit the house was impressive. While they explored the place, Liepin leveled up to 4 and unlocked a surprising new job, Ninja. Meanwhile, things were going south for Class 1-20. Their leader, a sage named Weiss, had tried to build a simple hut, but it looked like a pile of junk compared to Liepin's mansion. When the other students saw Liepin's house, they started insulting Weiss, calling his work a dilapidated shack. The pressure was too much, and the poorly built huts of Class 1-20 suddenly collapsed like dominoes, leaving everyone homeless in the dark. At the same time, the greedy principal and vice principal were planning to steal prize money meant for students. They had created a Best House award, thinking an elite student would win so they could pocket the subsidy. When they saw Liupin's two-story house from a distance, they were thrilled, thinking a golden egg student had built it. They rushed over with prize catalogs, only to find out from Manaka that Liupin, the trash student they exiled, was the creator. They were so furious they tore up the catalogs and ran away screaming. Later, they tried to launch a first-to-level-up award, hoping to find a class leader. Instead, they ran right into Liupin again, who had just hit level 4. The sight of him succeeding drove them crazy, and they fled back to the castle like madmen. Liupin ignored their weird behavior and focused on his new ninja job. He learned how to throw weapons with perfect accuracy. He carved some wooden shurikens and tested them out, hitting every target with ease thanks to his high concentration. While he was practicing, a group of students led by a guy named Nasuo showed up. Nasuo was a mage who could start fires with magic. He was acting like a big shot, demanding that Liupin kneel and beg if he wanted a flame to keep warm. Liupin just looked at him, unimpressed. With his ranger skills, he knew a dozen ways to start a fire without any help. He told Nasuo to get lost, making it clear he didn't need a flashy mage to survive in the woods. He was mad that Liupin didn't act scared of him, so he threw a burning branch into Liupin's house to start a fire. A bunch of other students joined in, blocking the door and laughing, waiting for the place to burn down. But Liupin wasn't worried because he built his house to be fireproof. The fire just went out on its own, leaving the bullies looking like idiots. To show them how it's really done, Liupin used his dexterity and ranger skills to build a professional fire-starting kit from scratch. He made a fire instantly without using any magic, which shocked everyone. Suddenly, the bullies changed their tone and started begging for some fire so they could go cook lunch. Liupin told them he's nothing like them and tossed some burning shurikens at them. The fire caught onto their robes, and while they weren't seriously hurt, they ended up looking ridiculous in burnt, tiny clothes before running away crying. Later, Liupin headed into the forest to find lunch since the academy makes everyone find their own food. Using his appraiser and ranger skills, he found some high-quality nuts and mushroom. He even crafted a special bag out of leaves that could carry a ton of weight. While hunting, he found an ultra-rare mushroom called tatsumake, known as the king of mushrooms, and tucked it away. Deep in the woods, he ran into a girl named Akemi, a beautiful alchemist from a top class. She was with a guy named Thieves, who was trying to act cool by giving her advice on which mushrooms were safe. Thieves told her the red ones were poison and the blue ones were safe, but Liupin stepped in and corrected him. He told Akemi that the blue ones would actually cause bad hallucinations and pain. Akemi trusted Liupin's honest eyes and ignored Thieves. To thank Liupin, she gave him a bag of salt and a lucky kiss on the cheek. This kiss actually leveled Liupin up, giving him the stonecrafter job and boosting his stats. Liupin went back home and used his new skills to craft a stone hammer, a chisel, and a stone stove. He grilled the mushrooms he found, seasoned them with Akemi's salt, and had a great meal. Just then, the principal and vice principal came running out of nowhere, looking desperate. They had seen him find the rare tatsumake mushroom on the school's live broadcast and wanted it for themselves. They even offered to move him out of the garbage class if he gave it up. Liupin just shrugged and told them he already ate it, leaving them screaming in frustration. Feeling tired, Liupin switched to his ninja job and climbed a tree to take a nap where no one would mess with him. He woke up later that night to the sound of Manaka's voice. She had come all the way into the dark forest to thank him again for building her house and brought a pot of dinner for him. Liupin realized he was hungry again and looked down at her, touched by the gesture. Liupin and Manaka sat on a tree branch, enjoying a hearty soup she had brought for him. Manaka, his childhood friend, was a bit nervous about being up so high, but she felt safe with him. As they talked, Manaka got flustered asking about a rumor involving Liupin and another girl. She became so shaky that she lost her balance and fell. Liupin didn't hesitate. He jumped after her, caught her midair, and landed perfectly on the ground, holding her like a princess. The moment was nostalgic for both of them, reminding them of when they were kids. Liupin decided to carry her all the way home. Even though Manaka was embarrassed about other students seeing them, she secretly loved it. The guys in the residential area were fuming with jealousy, but Manaka just buried her face in Liupin's chest, her ears turning bright red. After dropping her off, Liupin headed back to his forest hut. His sharp senses picked up a sweet scent inside. It was Shinobuko, the small ninja girl from class. She had snuck in, suspicious of Liupin's incredible skills. She tried to attack him with ninja moves, but Liupin's speed was on another level. He dodged everything effortlessly, making her look like a struggling kitten. Eventually, he caught her in a hug to stop the fight. Shinobuko got completely flustered, misinterpreting his words and turning bright red before fleeing through the window. This strange interaction actually caused Liapin to level up again. He noticed a new job available, treasure hunter. He switched to it, curious about its treasure discovery skill, and finally went to sleep. The next morning, Liapin woke up in total darkness. He thought it was still night and kept sleeping, but eventually he realized something was wrong. He checked the window and found someone had taped black paper over it to trick him. He was late for the first day of school. He sprinted to the academy. As he approached the castle-like school building, his new treasure hunter skill triggered. He spotted a strange black flag high up on the wall, far beyond the normal range of the skill. He used his ninja abilities to climb the wall and retrieve it. When he appraised the item, he was shocked. It wasn't a flag, but high-quality wyvern hide, an incredibly rare material. Meanwhile, in the school courtyard, the vice principal was smirking. He was the one who had taped Liapin's window to make him look bad. He announced to the gathered students that the person who found a hidden piece of dragon hide would become the student council president. He thought he had hidden it perfectly, but he had no idea that Liapin was already walking toward the crowd with the legendary prize draped over his shoulder. The vice principal was so shocked he started acting like he'd seen a ghost. To save face, he suddenly lied and claimed it was just a dirty piece of black skin and told Liapin to keep the trash. Liapin didn't mind and kept the item, which was actually a rare wyvern hide. During lunch, things got even better for Liapin. Three of the most popular and beautiful girls in school, Manaka, Akemi, and Shinobuko, all gathered around him. They started feeding him food from their own lunchboxes, making every other guy in the area burn with jealousy. This lunch attack was so effective that Liapin actually leveled up just by eating, unlocking the leather crafter job. Meanwhile, Liapin's former classmates from class 1-20 were watching from afar, fuming. Their leader, Weiss, tried to convince everyone it was just a hallucination. Desperate to prove they were better, Weiss forced the class to skip lessons to search for the hide Liapin already had. By nightfall, they were exhausted and starving. A student named Thieves offered them some blue mushrooms he found earlier. Even though Liapin had warned them these were poisonous the day before, they were too hungry to care and ate them anyway. The result was a disaster. The entire class got hit with massive stomach pain. Because Weiss was too proud to ask for help, they all ended up unconscious and foaming at the mouth. They were found the next morning and sent to the infirmary, resulting in the entire class being demoted to a lower rank. That afternoon, Liapin went to his first elective class for leather crafting. The vice principal, still trying to be a bully, forced Liapin to sit on the bare floor in the back of the room. However, the class was joined by the sewing students, including Manaka. As soon as she saw Liapin on the floor, she refused her fancy throne and sat right next to him on the ground. To avoid a scandal with the school's supporters, the vice principal was forced to give in and finally gave Liapin a proper chair. Liapin finally sat down for class, thanks to Manaka's help. The teacher, Professor Falafai, announced they would be making leather capes and patches. Since the school was all about survival, they could borrow tools, but the vice principal stepped in to ruin things. He banned Liapin from using any standard school supplies because he was in the special training class. As a cruel joke, the vice principal handed Liapin a magical needle and scissors, but no thread, laughing because you can't sew leather without it. He didn't realize Liapin's worthless material was actually high-level dragon hide, which regular tools couldn't even touch. Liapin just smiled, took the tools, and walked out the window into the backyard. While the other students mocked him, thinking he was running away, Liapin was actually gathering strong vines from the garden. He stripped the fibers, cleaned them in the pond, and dried them over a fire to create high-quality thread. When he climbed back into the classroom with his handmade thread, the room went silent. Using his professional crafting skills, Liapin's hands moved like a machine. He wasn't just making a basic cape, he was sewing a full leather coat. The final product was so perfect it started to glow, hitting a high-quality status that even professional crafters rarely achieve. This dragon coat was incredible. It could hold tons of items without feeling heavy and protected the wearer from heat and cold. The vice principal tried to take credit, claiming it was only because of the godly tools he lent Liapin, but he quickly snatched them back and ran off. The other students fell for the lie and went back to looking down on Liapin, but Manaka didn't care. She asked Liapin to teach her how to sew. Liapin sat with her, telling her that the secret to crafting is putting your heart into it and thinking of someone's smile. Manaka took his advice to heart while making a small patch. Suddenly her hands glowed too. She had produced a high-quality heart patch fueled by her feelings for Liapin. She shyly gifted the patch to him, and he sewed it onto his dragon coat. The moment the two items combined, the coat transformed into a dragon and saint's coat. It jumped past level 100, reaching a legendary rank that even royal craftsmen struggle to hit. Now the coat could actually heal Liapin's wounds and repair itself automatically. Even Professor Falafai was so impressed she asked Liapin to teach her. Later, during gym class, Liapin didn't have a uniform, so he wore his new legendary coat. Seeing Manaka in her athletic gear was such a pleasant surprise. that it actually triggered another level up for him, proving just how much of a positive influence she was on his growth. Liepin checked his status and noticed he was leveling up fast, even picking up a mysterious, hidden skill that stayed locked for now. He didn't overthink it and decided to switch his job to martial arts just in time for PE class. This new job gave him serious combat skills like karate, boxing, and a powerful one-inch punch. The PE teacher, a massive muscular guy named Nick Bacca, started the class by explaining that the school's protective magic, which keeps monsters away and prevents thirst, would start fading tomorrow. He warned everyone that they'd need to fight to survive. To show off, Nick singled out Liepin, calling him unemployed trash and challenging him to a sparring match. Nick even bragged that he'd take Liepin's first hit without even defending himself. Liepin didn't hold back. He used his special ability to shift all his stat points into muscle strength, giving him insane power. He landed a simple body blow and the result was crazy. Nick was sent flying several meters through the air and knocked out cold. The other students were stunned, but Nick eventually woke up and tried to play it off as a special technique to minimize damage. Feeling embarrassed, Nick demanded a payback hit. Liepin quickly shifted his stats again, this time putting everything into toughness. When Nick swung a heavy punch at Liepin's face, it sounded like hitting a stone wall. Liepin didn't move an inch, but Nick's hand completely shattered. The teacher collapsed in pain, screaming about his broken bones, while Liepin stood there totally fine. After school, Liepin headed back to his forest home. Knowing monsters would be coming soon, he switched to the woodman job to gather materials, and then to carpenter to build a massive fence and gate. His high stats made the wooden structures stronger than stone. Once he finished, the house fence and gate fused together and his home evolved into a base of operation. Vice Principal Yesman was having a terrible day. Furious, Yesman stormed through the school halls, smashing statues of the principal to vent his anger. When Principal Nekadrin showed up, Yesman tried to blame Liepin for the mess, but the principal didn't care about the statue. He was excited because he heard Yesman owned god-tier tool. He grabbed a basic needle and scissors from Yesman's pocket, thinking they were legendary items. Before Yesman could explain they were just normal tools, the principal announced they would be sent to a royal museum. Yesman was stuck in a lie and his stress levels went through the roof. Desperate for revenge, Yesman teamed up with the PE teacher Nick Bacca. He told Nick to turn the next class into a brutal brawl to teach Liepin a lesson. However, the plan failed miserably. Experts at the museum quickly figured out the tools were fakes, and Liepin ended up knocking out the PE teacher during their fight. Because of this mess, the education committee demoted the principal, the vice principal, and Nick Bacca. They were now the laughingstock of the school. Meanwhile, Liepin was living his best life. He had turned his old, broken house into a high-level base, something usually only kings or legendary heroes can do. This achievement gave him a massive level up and boosted his stats, especially his dexterity. He even unlocked a new job, trapper. Liepin spent his mornings setting up traps around his new home to keep intruders away. It didn't take long for them to work. First, he found his classmate Shinobuko, a ninja in training, hanging from a tree after getting caught in a wire trap. He let her down, but she just crawled away angrily. Next, he found Vice Principal Yesman stuck in a deep pit trap in his garden. Yesman was covered in mud and crying about his ruined, expensive suit. Liepin helped him out, and as Yesman limped away, Liepin gained even more experience points for testing his traps on them. With another level up, Liepin unlocked the woodcrafter job. Now, he didn't just have a strong base. He had the skills to make furniture and tools to turn his empty house into a real home. He immediately grabbed some wood and started crafting, ready to make his palace of light even better. Using a stone knife and a wooden mallet, the work moves fast. Professional skills make a huge difference, and soon high-quality furniture is ready. A large dining table and 10 durable chairs are finished first, followed by a storage shelf and 4 beds that actually help people sleep better. With the house finally feeling like a home, the base levels up from a dilapidated house to a normal house, unlocking a new skill that allows for expansion into nearby areas. Hunger eventually kicks in, so it's time to head out for food. Near the residential area, a student named Weiss is standing on a platform, bossing everyone around. He's been appointed as the base committee chairman and is giving a loud speech about building a base before nightfall. The other students don't seem very excited, but they follow along anyway. Watching from a distance, the goal is simply to find a meal, so the journey continues back into the woods. Deep in the forest, a girl with long black hair and traditional Eastern clothing is trying to hunt a bird with a bow. This is Katun, a Miko, shrine maiden from class 1-19. She misses her shot and looks defeated, explaining that she's out of arrows and has only ever practiced on stationary targets. To help out, some branches are quickly whittled into throwing weapons. With a single perfect toss, a bird is taken down, dropping fresh meat and colorful feathers. Katun is shocked by the skill on display. Using the new materials, a set of high-quality arrows is crafted for her on the spot. Looking at her bow, it's clear it's a cheap, Western-style bow that doesn't suit her Eastern Kyudo archery style. After a quick search for the right wood, a custom, asymmetrical Eastern bow is built. It's lightweight, powerful, and fits her perfectly. With the new gear, Katon takes a deep breath, calms her heart, and fires. The arrow flies like a flash of light, instantly taking down another bird. Overwhelmed by the craftsmanship and the insight shown, Katon drops to the ground in a deep bow. She is so impressed that she begs to become an apprentice. While there's no interest in taking on a student, a deal is made. In exchange for occasional advice, Katon agrees to be friendly with Manaka, the saint from class 1-2. The moment is interrupted by Tomo, Katon's loud and protective attendant, who charges in thinking her lady is being harassed. Seizing the chance to avoid a headache, it's time to slip away. On the walk back, some wild green onions are discovered. Back at the house, the bird meat and onions are skewered together and grilled over the stone hearth. The smell is amazing and the taste is even better, crispy, sweet, and juicy. Remembering a tip from an old chef, the leftover onion roots are saved to be regrown in water. This sparks a new mission, finding a permanent water source. As the protective magic over the area starts to fade, more wild animals like rabbits and deer begin to appear. Since animals need water to survive, finding a nearby spring or stream is the next big goal for the afternoon. Liapin headed deeper into the mushroom fields and found a peaceful pond where wild animals were drinking water. Just as he was about to relax, three brothers with mohawks, the Pira brothers, showed up. These guys were from the bandit class and started acting like tough guys, claiming the pond was their territory. They laughed at Liapin, calling him a loser and threatening to beat him up. Liapin didn't even flinch. He casually switched his job to martial artist and took a boxing stance. As the brothers rushed him with nail-filled clubs, Liapin landed 3 lightning-fast punches right on their noses. The brothers collapsed instantly, crying and bleeding, shocked that a nobody could take them down so easily. Suddenly, a massive wild boar, the true king of the pond, crashed through the bushes. The Pira brothers scrambled away in fear, watching from a distance and hoping the beast would finish Liapin off. But Liapin was ready. He switched his job to ninja and waited for the boar to charge. At the last second, he jumped, grabbed the boar's tusks in midair, and used a powerful move called the Izuna throw. He flipped the giant beast and slammed it headfirst into the ground, creating a massive crater. The shockwave was so strong it knocked the Pira brothers out of the trees where they were hiding. Terrified, they ran away on all fours like rabbits. Liapin then collected high-quality loot from the boar, meat, hide, and sharp tusks. He spent the afternoon crafting, tanning the leather in the pond water, and carving a new super-sharp knife from the tusks. He even made needles and sewed 10 leather water bottles to carry water back home. When Liapin returned to the residential area, he saw something horrifying. Weiss, the self-proclaimed sage, had built a massive 50-meter-tall wooden wall around the town. The structure was a total mess, shaky, unstable, and held together by luck. Liapin warned Weiss that the wall was going to collapse, but Weiss just mocked him, calling him stupid and claiming it was a special design that was meant to sway. Realizing nobody would listen, Liapin rushed to Manaka's house. He quickly built a sturdy fence around her property using heavy lumber he had collected. Manaka and her friend Katon tried to help him convince others to take cover, but the other students just laughed, trusting Weiss instead. Only a few students from Manaka, Katon, and Akemi's classes stayed inside Liapin's makeshift safety zone. As night fell, the wind picked up. Suddenly, a loud cracking sound filled the air. The massive wooden wall couldn't hold and began to fall inward like a giant mountain collapsing. Huge logs rained down on the town, crushing everything in their path. While the rest of the residential area was buried in a mess of wood and dust, Liapin's breakwater fence held strong, protecting the house and the few people who had trusted him. While the students were saved by protective spells, the school grounds looked like a field hospital. Principal Nekodurin and Vice Principal Yesman, worried about their own reputations, quickly shifted the entire blame onto Weiss, a student from class 1-20. They lied and claimed Weiss caused the disaster to earn extra credit. Even though Manaka and Katon, leaders from top classes, tried to tell the truth and give credit to Liapin for saving people, the school leaders suppressed their voices. They refused to acknowledge Liapin because he was a commoner and didn't fit their elite world. As a result, Weiss's class was demoted to the lowest rank, while Manaka and Katon's classes were promoted. Weiss was devastated. He wandered through the ruins, facing insults from other students who no longer respected him. To make things worse, he received a letter from his father calling him a disgrace to the family. Terrified of losing his inheritance, Weiss's mind snapped. He returned to his class and tried to blame Liapin for the wall's collapse, claiming Liapin sabotaged them out of jealousy. He even tried to force his classmate, Kalulu, a girl known for her messy style but perfect makeup, to burn down Liapin's house. Surprisingly, Kalulu refused. She admitted that while Liapin was annoying, he truly loved making things and would never destroy someone else's work. She even accidentally let slip that she had feelings for him. Losing control, Weiss tried to hit Kalulu, but another classmate named Monsoon stopped him, warning Weiss that he'd throw him in the trash if he laid a hand on a girl. Enraged and humiliated, Weiss tried to use a powerful sage spell to blast his own classmates. But before he could finish, a log suddenly swung out of nowhere and sent him flying into a literal pile of garbage. Liapin appeared carrying logs for repairs. He casually apologized, saying he didn't realize he'd hit Weiss. Kalulu tried to thank him in her own shy way, but Liapin just shrugged it off and kept moving. He had been kicked out of the cleanup effort by the principal anyway, so he headed back to his own place. The next morning, Liapin got to work. He crafted high-quality planters and leveled up, unlocking a rare new job, Mana Farmer. This job allowed him to see the world differently, identifying plants and spirits with perfect clarity. He discovered wild sweet potatoes growing in his garden, small and bitter, but perfect for a start. Realizing that farming with bare hands was too slow, Liapin grabbed some high-quality wood and his trusty knife. Using his skills, he began crafting the proper tools he needed to turn his small plot of land into a real farm. Liapin was ready to start his life as a farmer. He looked at the forest around his house, which was now much clearer since he had cut down the trees for timber. To make a proper field, he used his stone shovel to dig up the old tree stumps. Instead of wasting them, he chopped them into firewood with his axe. Because of his high woodcutting skills, the firewood was top quality and would burn much longer than normal wood. With the land cleared, it was time for the real work. Liapin grabbed his custom-made hoe and used a special magic spell called Enchant Wind. Suddenly, a small whirlwind of leaves wrapped around him, giving his arms a boost of power. When he swung his hoe into the dirt, it didn't just dig a small hole. The ground bubbled and loosened up for an entire square meter with just one hit. He was so impressed by how easy it was that he ended up tilling a huge 20-meter area instead of the small garden he had planned. Next, he planted some sweet potato cuttings. These were originally very poor quality, but Liapin used another skill called Breath of Light. He poured all 18 of his mana points into the ground. In an instant, the tiny plants exploded with life, growing so fast that they spread out into the forest. Liapin was exhausted and out of mana, but he was surrounded by a massive field of potatoes. When he pulled one out, he saw that his magic had turned the low-quality plants into small, beautiful, and very sweet potatoes. He decided to roast some over a fire. The smell was so good that it attracted 3 girls from the nearby academy, Manaka, Akemi, and Katon. They looked like they were in a trance, following the scent like hungry fairies. Liapin offered them some, and even though they were high-class ladies who usually had strict manners, they couldn't help themselves. They devoured the hot, fluffy potatoes and were shocked by how delicious they were. The girls eventually admitted they came to him because the academy was in a total mess. While Liapin had a nice house and plenty of food, the other students were living in a literal garbage dump. The academy was covered in rubble, and the students were just moving trash from one class area to another instead of actually cleaning it up. People were starving and desperate. Liapin decided to help. He loaded up carts with 2 tons of sweet potatoes to send back to the residential area. He wasn't allowed to go there himself because of the school's rules, so Akemi's followers hauled the carts away. Manaka was so moved by his kindness that she almost started crying, and Liapin playfully patted her head like he used to when they were younger. Back at the academy, the arrival of the food caused a massive scene. The girls told everyone that the food came from Liapin and that no one could eat unless they personally thanked him. This led to a line of students heading into the forest to find Liapin's house. Some were genuinely thankful, while others were arrogant jerks who had looked down on him before. Liapin didn't let the rude ones off easy. He made them bow down and beg before he'd give them his blessing to eat. Seeing how hunger made even the proudest students drop their egos was a huge wake-up call for everyone. The next morning, the academy held an assembly in the ruins of the school ground. The vice principal stood on a stage and started handing out booklets called slave tickets. These tickets were a special type of currency used in pioneer school. Each ticket represented one use or one serving, effectively turning the students' labor and survival into a system controlled by the school. As the tickets were handed out to the crowd, Liapin stood at the very back, watching the school introduce this strange new system. Basically, these tickets act like a do-anything favor. If you give someone a ticket with your face on it, they have to follow one order from you. While it's not a law, refusing an order makes your ticket's value drop until you're considered socially worthless. To keep your value high, you have to follow through on the favors. The vice principal, a petty man who hates Leo, used Leo's ticket as a bad example. He showed everyone that Leo's ticket had a value of 0, calling it trash paper that wasn't even good for the bathroom. The students laughed, thinking no one would ever want a favor from a guy in the special training class. Then, the school revealed an asset ranking board to track which class collected the most tickets from others. To make things competitive, they offered a 10 million yen prize to the first class to make the board. They also gave special gold tickets to the 2 most popular girls, Manaka and Katon, because of their high status. As soon as the meeting ended, Manaka and Katon shocked everyone. They ran straight to Leo and tried to give him all their tickets. They were basically confessing their loyalty in front of the whole school. The vice principal freaked out and tried to stop them, saying elite students shouldn't give tickets to trash. But the girls argued back, saying Leo had built them a house and taught them skills, so the tickets were fair payment for his help. The vice principal was forced to give in but tried to limit them to giving Leo just one ticket each at the lowest value. He thought this would keep Leo poor. However, the girls' lowest value tickets were worth 10 million yen each. Suddenly, Leo had 20 million yen. Two other girls, Akemi and Shinobuko, also handed him their tickets, bringing his total to over 21 million. In just a few minutes, Leo went from having a worthless zero-value ticket to being the richest student in school, taking the one spot on the ranking board. The vice principal lost his mind and tried to smash the ranking board with a chair, but he was stopped by another teacher. Because he acted like a lunatic in front of the king, who was watching the broadcast, and failed to give out the promised prizes, he was demoted. He lost his official title and became a proxy vice principal with a big pay cut. While the school staff was falling apart, Leo returned to his forest home and reached level 12. He unlocked a rare, top-tier job called series carpenter. This job is so high-level that it's usually reserved for building holy temples for gods. Leo didn't think much of it at first, since he didn't plan on building a temple. Meanwhile, the rest of the students started using a new school store run by the demoted vice principal. He began selling level-up potions for 2 million yen each to suck up all the tickets. The students were desperate to get stronger, so the shop was a huge hit, and the residential area finally started to look like a real town as people spent their wealth to grow. The school started selling special tickets to fix the disaster damage. Rich classes paid millions to have professional series carpenters clear the rubble and build houses instantly, while the poor classes were left with nothing. Katon, Amiko, Shrine Maiden, and her friend Manaka came to see Leo. Katon was desperate because the vice principal was forcing her class to move out of Manaka's place. The vice principal even brought in a professional carpenter and demanded Katon hand over her tickets to pay them. Instead, Katon gave all her tickets to Leo, her master, and asked him to build the house. Leo casually agreed, saying he'd do any crafting job even without being asked. Leo went into the forest and gathered high-quality white wood and crimson flowers. While the professional carpenters worked nearby, laughing at Leo for being a jobless student working alone, Leo started building at an insane speed. The pros were shocked when they saw his perfect foundation. Things got even more heated when Manaka and Katon started pampering Leo, wiping his sweat and giving him water. The professional carpenters were fuming with jealousy. Leo finished a beautiful, high-quality house in record time. But since Katon is a Miko, her home is considered a shrine and shouldn't have a normal gate. Leo decided to go the extra mile. He used the crimson flowers to dye the wood a deep red and built a torii gate. When the professional carpenters saw the torii, they lost it. They claimed only they were allowed to build shrines and accused Leo of being a criminal who didn't fear God. Led by the vice principal carrying a giant hammer, they rushed at Leo's building to tear it down. Suddenly, the sky turned dark, and judgment lightning crashed down from the heaven. It blasted the attackers, leaving the vice principal and the carpenters charred and smoking in a huge hole. Their own half-finished house exploded, but Leo's shrine stood perfectly still, glowing in a holy light. Katon was moved to tears, realizing God had personally approved of Leo's work. She threw herself into Leo's arms in gratitude. As she stayed there, Leo instinctively stroked her hair, making her feel even more attached to him. Suddenly, Tomo, Katon's tough female bodyguard, dragged Leo away. She was angry and suspicious, demanding to know how a jobless guy could build a holy shrine. She warned Leo to stay away from Katon, even threatening him with her swords. Leo noticed her wooden sword was low-quality junk from the school shop. While she was yelling, Leo picked up some ogrewood from the rubble and quickly carved a new wooden sword for her. Tomo was skeptical until she swung it. It felt perfect. Leo told her to try hitting a rock with it. Tomo laughed, thinking the wood would snap, but she took a swing anyway. With a loud crash, the wooden sword stayed perfect while the giant rock split clean in half. Tomo stood there, completely speechless, staring at the power of the simple gift Leo had just made. He immediately got defensive, pointing the sword at Liepin and demanding to know why an enemy would give him such a powerful weapon. Liepin just stayed chill, telling him they weren't enemies, and that he only made the sword because he knew Tomo wanted to protect Katon from the creeps hanging around her. This hit a nerve. Tomo got all red in the face, acting like a tough guy to hide his embarrassment. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a slave ticket worth 100,000, and shoved it into Liepin's hand, insisting he didn't want to owe him anything. Before stomping off, he told Liepin not to get too close to Katon, a big change from his usual stay away forever. As Tomo left, Liepin leveled up and unlocked a new job, tamer. Excited to try out his new skills, Liepin headed into the forest. He tried to get close to rabbits and birds, but they all got spooked and ran away. He realized that since he usually hunts in this forest, the animals are naturally terrified of him. He tried building a trap to catch a bird and tame it by force, but the bird just laughed at him and flew off. That's when it clicked. His charm stat was way too low. He decided to go all in and dumped 3,000 points into charm. Suddenly, the ground started shaking. Every animal in the forest came sprinting toward him with hearts in their eyes. He got completely mobbed by fluffy animals, birds on his face, squirrels in his clothes, and deer rubbing against him. It was way too much, so he quickly dialed the charm back to a more reasonable level. With his stats balanced, he went to a nearby pond. This time, the animals didn't run. They walked up to him like he was their best friend. He successfully tamed a cute fawn, which started following his every command like a well-trained dog. But as he was playing with the fawn, he accidentally bumped into what he thought was a huge rock. It wasn't a rock, it was a massive bear, twice his height, known as the Master of the Forest. The bear grabbed him, and for some reason, Liupin's special skills wouldn't activate. Just as he thought he was about to get his head bitten off, the bear started licking his face. Even the forest boss couldn't resist his charm. Liupin tamed the bear, named him Mark, and hitched a ride on his shoulders back home. When they got back, they found 4 thugs waiting at the gate, the 3 Mohawk brothers from before and their big brother, Boodle, who called himself a bear killer. They were talking big about peeling Liupin's skin off, but then they saw Mark standing right behind him. The thugs completely lost it, screaming and crying as they tried to climb trees to escape. Liupin didn't even have to lift a finger. He just told Mark to handle it. The giant bear shook the trees like they were toothpicks, dropping the thugs to the ground. They crawled away in total terror, realizing Liupin was a monster who had actually tamed the Forest King. With the area clear, Liupin decided to build Mark a proper house. Since Mark was great at digging, they teamed up to create a cozy underground den right by the front gate, making Mark the ultimate house guard. Just then, his childhood friend Manaka arrived. Manaka is a saint in training, a kind girl who has always been close to Leo. When Leo turned to greet her, Manaka suddenly froze and acted extremely flustered. Leo was confused until he checked his own status. He realized that while messing with his stats, he had accidentally boosted his charm to 101 points, over 100 times his original level, and twice as much as the most popular guy in school, Weiss. To Manaka, Leo suddenly looked impossibly handsome, making it hard for her to even look him in the face. Leo quickly set his charm back to normal so they could talk properly. Manaka was terrified when she saw Mark, but Leo introduced them, and she soon realized how gentle the bear was. Mark even gave them a ride on his shoulders and let them play on his soft stomach. Manaka was overjoyed because playing with a bear had been her childhood dream. She didn't even mind that her white saint's robe got dirty, telling Leo that getting dirty while spending time with the person she loves most was the greatest happiness. As they talked, Leo noticed heart-shaped symbols floating around her head, a sign that his tamer skills were allowing him to see her deep affection. The next day, Leo headed to the academy as classes resumed. On the way, he met Akemi, a stylish alchemist who was setting up a potion shop. She noticed some of Mark's fur on Leo's coat and used it to brew a special whirlwind voice potion. She gave it to Leo for free, explaining that it allows the user to whisper to someone from far away, though the voice carries to everyone nearby. When Leo arrived at school, the vice principal, who clearly had a grudge against him, forced him into a special outdoor class taught by a flashy instructor named Damana. Damana treated her students and pets exactly the same, even threatening to whip those who didn't perform well. Since Leo's bear was sleeping back in the forest, the vice principal mockingly gave him a stressed-out sewer rat to use as a pet. To handle the situation, Leo briefly boosted his charm stat again. The effect was so strong that every pet in the classroom ignored their owners and rushed toward Leo, showering him with love. Professor Damana was so impressed by Leo's natural talent that she gave him a suffocatingly tight hug, much to the vice principal's annoyance. To settle things, a pet battle tournament was arranged. Leo was pushed into the ring for the first match, only to find out his opponent was Weiss. Weiss, acting arrogant as usual, showed off his pet, a fierce, high-level black panther he claimed to have tamed himself. The other students laughed at Leo, thinking his tiny sewer rat stood no chance against such a powerful predator. In this school, pets are allowed to attack owners during battles, so things were looking bad for Liupin. Thinking fast, he licked a drop of whispering voice medicine and shouted for his pet Mark. At first, nothing happened and the crowd laughed at him. Weiss mocked him, calling him a loser, but the laughter died down when the ground started shaking. A massive presence was approaching, knocking down tents and kicking up clouds of dust. Suddenly, a giant bear, the legendary guardian of the forest, burst onto the scene. Everyone panicked, but Liupin calmly explained that the bear was his pet. He called the bear over, and the giant beast acted like a playful puppy wagging its tail. Right then, Manaka and Katun rushed in, completely out of breath. They had heard Liupin's magically boosted voice and thought he was calling for them. The crowd was stunned that Liupin had not only tamed a forest lord, but also had 2 top-tier girls following his every word. Weiss, furious and jealous, accused Liupin of using dirty tricks to mind control them, but nobody believed him. The teacher, Professor Damana, got excited and started the battle. Weiss ordered his black panther to kill the bear, but the cat just ignored him and yawned. When Weiss hit the panther with a whip to force it to fight, the cat snapped. Instead of attacking the bear, it turned around and pinned Weiss to the ground, ready to bite his throat out. Liupin jumped in to save Weiss, using his taming skill on the panther. Usually you can't tame someone else's pet, but the panther immediately stopped and started playfully licking Liupin's face. The students were terrified, thinking Liupin used a legendary NTR technique to steal the pet's loyalty. In reality, the cat was never truly loyal to Weiss, so Liupin's skill worked easily. A beaten and bloody Weiss was carried away on a stretcher, screaming that he was banishing the panther. Liupin decided to adopt the cat and named him Tom. He also found a small rat in his pocket, which he named Jewelry. Because of Liupin's victory, the vice principal was forced to hand over a massive cash prize. He tried to hold on to the money, but Liupin, his friends, and his pets literally dragged it out of his hands. This win pushed Liupin's group to the one spot on the school's wealth ranking. Later, Liupin walked home through the residential area and saw noble students crying over their destroyed houses. It turned out Mark the bear had accidentally flattened their homes on his way to the ring. Liupin felt bad at first, but then he overheard the students complaining that they had planned to destroy his house that afternoon. Hearing that, his guilt completely vanished. Behind the scenes, it turned out the principal and vice principal had helped Weiss smuggle that panther into the school specifically to get Liupin expelled. Their plan failed miserably. The vice principal had even tried to snitch on the principal to the Board of Education to save himself, but the whole scheme blew up in their faces. The principal got demoted, and Liupin returned to his forest home, stronger and richer than ever. The principal and vice principal were in a panic. Because they had given prize money to Liupin, whom they considered trash, their wealthy supporters were furious. The school was facing a total cutoff of funding unless the vice principal paid the money back out of his own pocket. Meanwhile, Weiss was having a nightmare of a day. After leaving the infirmary, he saw a crowd gathered around the school bulletin board. His class had been demoted again, and everyone was laughing at him. The rumors were spreading fast. The great sage was so incompetent that he got attacked by his own pet and had to be saved by an unemployed loser. Unable to handle the shame, Weiss ran away, screaming in frustration. The next morning, Liupin woke up feeling refreshed. He had leveled up to level 14 in his sleep because his garden traps kept catching things. He checked his stats and saw a new job available, Potter. Outside, his pet bear Mark was panicking because he had found way too much honey and had nothing to put it in. Liupin decided to help. He switched his job to stonecrafter to build a kiln out of forest rocks, then switched to Potter to turn some local sand and clay into high-quality jars. Thanks to his mass production skill, he finished the pots in just 1 minute. The jars turned out beautiful, glowing like the sun with cool bee-like patterns. While Liupin was giving the jars to a happy Mark, the principal and vice principal showed up. They had heard a rumor that a high-quality pot had been made and wanted to take it to impress their supporters. Liupin didn't even let them finish their sentence. He told them no and said the pots were for Mark. When Mark growled at them, the two cowards ran away screaming. Later that afternoon, Liupin headed to the student residential area. The place was booming with new shops and workshops. However, he noticed that almost every store had a sign saying special education students not allowed. It was clear someone was trying to freeze him out of the community. The only place without a ban was Acme's potion shop. There was a massive line of guys outside because Acme had a special deal. If you bought a potion, you got to watch her work through a window for 5 minutes. Because Liupin was her friend, the staff pulled him out of the line and treated him like a VIP, leading him straight into her private workshop. The guys in line were losing their minds with jealousy, watching an unemployed loser enter the secret garden that no one else was allowed to step foot in. Ignoring the murderous glares from the crowd, Liupin walked up to Acme to say hello. Business was booming at Acme's new potion shop. To celebrate, Liupin handed her a gift, a high-quality mortar and pestle he'd crafted himself using his new pottery skills. Acme froze when she saw the black-purple flower pattern on it. She was touched that he remembered her favorite flower from her shop sign, something no other man had ever noticed. In a moment of pure excitement, Acme pulled Liupin close and whispered that she'd never let go of the man who gave her that flower. Before he could react, she hugged him tight and started kissing his cheek with intense energy. Outside the window, her cult-like fanbase lost their minds, screaming in jealousy at the sight of their idol getting so close to him. Liupin felt like his energy was being drained and refilled at the same time, unable to pull away from her grip, until Acme's classmates finally rushed in to separate them. After the chaos calmed down, Acme acted like nothing happened and asked Liupin for a favor. She needed him to gather alchemy materials like seeds, moss, and claws. She even cheekily tried to ask for Liupin's own claws, but he shut that down quickly before heading home. On the way, his stats jumped up and he unlocked a new job, pastry chef. It felt useless for survival, but he didn't have much time to think about it before his pets, Mark the bear and Tom the panther, greeted him with gifts of honey and black sesame seeds. Just then, a girl named Kurumi from the chef class appeared at his gate. She was so terrified of his pets that she fainted on the spot. When she woke up, she was a total nervous wreck, stuttering and hiding behind her long bangs. She explained that she was a fellow pastry chef and felt completely worthless because the academy only valued real food, not sweets. She was sure she'd be kicked out soon and just wanted some sweet potatoes to make one last treat for her classmates. Liapin decided to help her out. He didn't just give her potatoes. He wanted to show her what a real pastry chef could do. He quickly switched jobs to a stonemason and carved a professional-grade frying pan out of rock right in front of her. Then he switched to woodworker and crafted cute heart and star-shaped candy molds. Kurumi was floored. She couldn't believe he had all these high-level skills. He told her to pour her sugar into the pan with some water. Kurumi was skeptical, thinking you couldn't make anything good with just those two ingredients. Liapin just smiled and told her to watch. As the sugar water bubbled and thickened into a perfect syrup, he prepared to use his new higashi baking skills to turn that simple mixture into something special. He pours it into a mold, and after a few minutes, clear, jewel-like candies pop out. Kurumi, a shy girl who is notoriously clumsy, is completely shocked. Liapin calls it gecko candy, a treat from the east. When Kurumi takes a bite, she's so overwhelmed by the perfect sweetness that she literally turns red and faints from pure joy. When she wakes up, she's incredibly humble and asks Liapin to teach her. Even though the process is simple, Kurumi's lack of skill makes her first attempt a total disaster. The candy comes out burnt, bitter, and sticky. Liapin doesn't give up on her though. They train together all night, and by dawn, Kurumi finally produces a normal, sweet batch of candy. She's so happy she cries and hugs Liapin, feeling for the first time like she's actually good at something. The candy becomes a massive hit at the school cafeteria, renamed as RPG Candy. It's so popular that the school's vice principal, a total yes-man who only cares about looking good, comes sniffing around to take credit. He tries to act like he's always supported Kurumi, even though he ignored her before. When he finds out the RPG in the name stands for Liapin Gecko, he loses his mind because he hates Liapin. The vice principal tries to bully Kurumi into changing the name and moving to a different class, even threatening to ruin her future. But Kurumi, inspired by Liapin's kindness, stands her ground and refuses. Furious, the vice principal uses a slave ticket to force an order on her. She is strictly forbidden from going near Liapin or she'll be banished. To his total shock, Kurumi reacts with pure joy. She realizes that being banished means she gets to join Liapin's special training class and stay by his side forever. She's ready to run to him right then and there. Panicked, the vice principal accidentally wastes his last ticket trying to cancel the order. He loses it and tries to trash her candy stall in a fit of rage, but Tamo, a strong female student, steps in. She catches Kurumi and tosses the vice principal aside like trash, telling him his behavior is a disgrace to teachers everywhere. The vice principal was acting like a total clown. After getting yelled at by Tamo, a skilled swordswoman from the troublemaker class, he tried to act tough. He pulled out special summoning tickets and called forth 4 thugs to beat her up. These guys looked like beat-up bandits, but they were ready to cause trouble. They surrounded Tamo, talking big about how they don't go easy on women. Tamo didn't flinch. She was ready to take them all on, but the vice principal pulled a dirty trick. He used a ticket Tamo had once used as a payment, which gave him magical control over her. He ordered her not to fight back and to just take a beating. Being a loyal samurai who follows the rules of a contract, Tamo actually put her sword down, knelt, and closed her eyes, letting them do whatever they wanted. The vice principal and his thugs rushed in, thinking they had a free win. But suddenly, a blur moved through the air. With one massive swing of a log, all 5 of them were sent flying into a giant pile of trash. They were buried under scrap metal, screaming for help. The person behind it was Liapin, the unemployed woodcrafter. He just stood there with a log on his shoulder, acting like he accidentally bumped into some trash. The classmates didn't even care about the thugs, they were just stunned by Liapin. The school rescue team had to dig the thugs out. The vice principal tried to claim he was a teacher, but because he was dressed in rags and acting crazy, the tough students from class 1-15 thought he was a fake. They dragged him away to their slum area to teach him a lesson, leaving him covered in cigarette burns. One burn on his forehead literally spelled out fake vice principal. The next day, the principal was fuming. Because of the vice principal's constant failures and his habit of ending up in the infirmary, the school board demoted him. He was given a choice: lose 2 ranks or pay Liapin 10 million in prize money and only lose 1 rank. The vice principal hated Liapin so much that he couldn't even speak, just making weird glitchy noises like a broken machine. Meanwhile, Liapin woke up feeling great and realized he had leveled up to 16. He unlocked a new job, fireworker. This job lets him make fireworks and use fire-based magic. He didn't have the materials yet, but he thought about making a show for his friend Manaka later. At the morning assembly, the vice principal showed up with a bandana covering his forehead burns. He handed everyone rescue fireworks. He explained that if anyone got into trouble while exploring, they could launch these for help. But there was a catch. Using one would lower your rank and cost you all your prize money. To mock Liapin, he showed a sample firework that displayed a message in the sky saying, "I'm a loser, I quit school. Liapin." The other students laughed, thinking Liapin would be the only one pathetic enough to use it. Next up was PE class. The teacher Nick Bacca announced a hell marathon. All the guys were tied together with a single rope, meaning if one person slowed down, they'd be dragged along. Nick was still salty about Liepin outshining him before, so he planned to push Liepin until he broke. Before the race started, the vice principal tried to take Liepin's coat, calling it trash. But Manaka and Katon stepped in, calling themselves Liepin's assistants and taking care of his gear. This made the vice principal even more jealous since he's always wanted pretty assistants. As the race was about to start, Nick Bacca leaned in and told Liepin to get ready for a world of pain, but Liepin just stayed calm, ready to run. The Hell Marathon was officially on. The teacher Nick Bacca announced that there was no set course, they would just run north until the very last person gave up. Leo, who everyone looked down on as a loser, was at the very back of the line. Before starting, he put in earplugs to block out the insults from the other student, and used his special skills to swap his stats, boosting his speed and stamina to insane level. The other runners were all former track stars, and they planned to sprint at full speed to drag Leo along until he was nothing but a mess on the ground. They were jealous because two popular girls, Manaka and Katun, were supporting him. After 40 kilometers of sprinting, the other guys were exhausted and drenched in sweat, but Leo was following behind them without even breaking a sweat. He looked like he was just taking a casual walk. At the 50-kilometer mark, they reached a rest area. The vice principal had set it up but specifically banned Leo from entering, leaving him out in the scorching sun while the other students relaxed with cold water and fans. However, a carriage suddenly pulled up. It was a private rest area just for Leo, arranged by Professor Demana and the two girls. Manaka and Katun even stepped out in cheerleader outfits to cheer him up. They gave him water, fanned him, and even gave him a massage. The other students watching from their heavenly tent were losing their minds with jealousy, realizing their plan to humiliate him had completely backfired. The vice principal was furious. He had secretly given the other students illegal potions to boost their stamina and special magic shoes to make them 10 times faster. Their stats were now at 500, which is superhuman. He was sure that once the race restarted, they would leave Leo in the dust. To make things harder, the rules were changed. No more rest stops and no more cheering. Leo told the girls to head home and got back to the race. The doped-up students took off like rockets, convinced Leo couldn't possibly keep up with their magical speed. But when they looked back, Leo was right there, still looking perfectly calm. They pushed themselves even harder, running faster than professional athletes, but Leo didn't fall back an inch. He actually had stats of 1,000, double what their cheating gear gave them. Eventually, the potions wore off and the students' bodies started to give out. One by one, they collapsed in agony. As they fell, Leo nimbly jumped over them, telling them not to push themselves too hard. Since they were all still tied together, Leo, who was still full of energy, kept running at full speed. The students who had tried to drag him down were now the ones being dragged across the dirt like ragdolls, facing the very hell they had planned for him. Liepin didn't feel angry at all. Even though people were constantly trying to set him up, he just kept running his marathon with a smile on his face. He actually started to enjoy the run, but behind him, things were a total mess. Because the rope ignored weight, Liepin couldn't even feel them being dragged behind him. He had earplugs in, so he couldn't hear their desperate screams as they were dragged through dirt, sand, and over rough rocks. They tried to dig their heels in and stop, but Liepin was too fast and strong. After hours of running through jagged terrain and swamps, Liepin felt a tiny bit of resistance and finally slowed down to look back. He was shocked by what he saw. Professor Nick Bacca and the other students were covered in mud and looked like half-dead statues. They were barely breathing and completely broken. When Liepin asked if they were okay, Nick Bacca could only gasp for air and beg him to stop running. The professor was so traumatized that he burst into tears at the mere mention of continuing the race. Liepin felt bad and untied the rope, but the men were so weak they couldn't even stand up. They just lay on the ground, crying about how their plan had backfired. Liepin offered to run and get help, but they panicked and grabbed his legs, accusing him of trying to abandon them. They demanded he take responsibility for their condition. Liepin realized he didn't have his distress signal on him, so he asked if they had one. Nick Bacca handed over a red tube, claiming his arm was too hurt to use it and ordering Liepin to fire it. Before launching it, Liepin remembered that these signals verify the user's identity. He used his special hearing skills and overheard the group whispering nearby. They revealed their true plan. They had intended to trap Liepin in this forest so monsters would finish him off at night. The distress signal Nick Bacca gave him was a trick. It was coded with a message saying Liepin was a fool who wanted to quit school. Liepin realized that if he fired it, he'd be kicked out of the academy. He decided he had no reason to help people who wanted him dead, but he didn't want them to actually die either. Using his fireworker skill, he quickly modified the fireworks. He handed the tube back to the group, told them he had updated the name on it to Nick Bacca's, and ran off toward the school. As the sun went down, the group started shouting insults at Liepin's retreating shadow, but their arrogance turned to pure terror when they heard a scary roar. A pack of goblins jumped out of the bushes. The exhausted students and the professor were surrounded and started getting beaten up by the monsters. In a panic, they tried to fire the distress signal, hoping Liepin was lying about changing the name. The firework shot into the sky and exploded into bright letters for the whole kingdom to see. The message read, "Please help me. I was a fool to follow the professor's orders. I'm quitting school. Please help me." Nick Bacca. While that chaos was happening, Liepin reached the academy and crossed the finish line, where his friends Manaka and Katon were waiting for him. He had accidentally broken the world record for a marathon. The three of them watched the beautiful fireworks together, and Liepin thanked the girls for supporting him, giving them both a friendly pat on the head. The next day, the truth came out. The rescue team had found Nick Bacca being thrashed by goblins, and since the firework had his name and a resignation message, the vice principal used it as an excuse to fire him immediately. Nick Bacca tried to blame Liepin, but no one believed him because Liepin was already back at the school when the signal went off. The professor, who used to be an elite athlete, lost everything. He was kicked out of the school and his own family. As guards dragged him away in a cage, he screamed for Liepin to save him, finally admitting that Liepin was the most talented person in the academy. Back in his room, Liepin woke up to a faint sound, wondering if he had imagined a cry for help. As he sat up, he noticed his body was glowing again. Liepin's level hit 17, and a new job called Mapper appeared on his status screen. In this academy, mapping is a big deal because it helps everyone find resources and navigate the dangerous forest. Usually, combat students protect the mappers while they work, but since Liepin is an outcast, he decided to do it all himself. The only problem was he didn't have any paper or pens. Just as he was wondering what to do, a flyer blew into his leg. It was a wanted poster with a villainous drawing of him, filled with lies claiming he was a creep who used drugs to trick girls. Liepin realized these posters were why people kept bothering him. He saw a student running away from his Black Panther, Tom, dropping a whole stack of these flyers. Liepin realized the back of the posters was clean, so he gathered them up. He finally had his paper. Next, he needed something to write with. He went home, took some leftover oak wood, and turned it into high-quality charcoal using his kiln. He then ground the charcoal, mixed it with clay, and baked it to create custom charcoal pencils that could write on any surface. To finish his kit, he used his woodcrafter skills to make a sturdy clipboard. Ready to go, Liepin headed into the forest with Tom. He switched his job to Mapper, which gave him absolute memory, a skill that let him remember every detail of a landscape perfectly, as long as he didn't get into a fight. By following hidden animal trails, he discovered rare items like night-blooming clover and burning grass, which he collected for his friend Aikman. He even found a shortcut to a nearby pond. While he was drawing his map, a group of arrogant upper-class students showed up to bully him. They wanted to beat him up and force-feed him random mushrooms to see if they were poisonous. Liepin didn't want to fight because it would erase his mapped memory, but he didn't have to worry. Tom jumped out of the shadows and scared the bullies so badly they fell into the pond. After they ran off like wet rats, Liepin finished his map in peace. Continuing deeper into the forest, he ran into Wonsko, an assistant to a girl named Manaka. Wonsko was in a pathetic state, with his arm stuck deep inside a rock crevice. Even while trapped, he started yelling at Liepin, calling him a bad person because of the rumors on the flyers. Liepin ignored the insults and looked for a solution. He found some arami fruit, crushed it, and mixed it with water to create a natural detergent and lubricant. He poured the liquid into the crack, and Wonsko's arm slipped right out. Instead of being fully grateful, Wonsko acted surprised and then started judging Liepin for having a dirty shirt. He couldn't understand why Liepin would walk around with stains if he knew how to make detergent. Since the school only let girls use the laundry rooms, Liepin usually didn't bother with it. When Liepin asked why Wonsko had his hand in the rock in the first place, the guy got embarrassed and told him it was none of his business. Liepin looked into the gap in the rock where Wonsko had been reaching and spotted a dull blue stone. It was a raw gemstone. Wonsko looked away, feeling embarrassed that she'd been struggling all morning to get it. Liepin didn't laugh. Instead, he called out a mouse from his pocket. The little guy scurried into the hole and brought the gem right out. When Liepin handed it to her, Wonsko was shocked. She couldn't believe he got it so easily. She was so happy she almost thanked him, but she caught herself. In her family of knights, saying thank you is a big deal. It's like a sacred pact where you promise to give your life for someone. She wasn't ready for that, so she acted tough instead. Suddenly, a giant white bird swooped down and attacked Wonsko, stealing the gem right out of her hand. She panicked, but Liepin stayed calm. He had already sent his pet Black Panther, Tom, to hide in the trees. As the bird tried to fly away, Tom leaped out and took it down midair, finishing it off and bringing the gem back in his mouth. Wonsko was terrified of the panther at first, but when she realized Tom was friendly, she totally changed. She started babying him, rubbing his belly and calling him a big kitty. While she was distracted, Liepin collected some rare feathers and items from the bird. As they relaxed, Wonsko opened up. Her dream was to become a holy knight so she could protect her friend Manaka. To do that, she needed to set 3 specific gems, red, blue, and yellow, into her sword. Finding and polishing these gems usually takes years because you need a high-level jeweler, which the school didn't have yet. Liepin had a crazy idea. He noticed Tom's tongue was rough like a diamond file. He switched his job to a stone crafter and used Tom's tongue to polish the raw blue gem. In minutes, he turned the rough stone into a sparkling, perfectly cut jewel. Onsko couldn't believe her eyes. She fit the gem into her sword and it glowed with power. She was so moved she almost cried, realizing Liepin had saved her years of work. But Liepin wasn't done. He figured out that the bird they fought probably had a nest nearby full of shiny things. He climbed a tall tree, ignoring Onsko's worried screams, and found the nest. Inside, he spotted exactly what she needed, a yellow gemstone and a red gemstone. He held them up, showing her that in just one day, her impossible quest was almost finished. Onsko just collapsed on the ground, completely stunned by his luck and skill. So Liepin tries to tell Onsko it's not a dream, it's just proof of how badly she wants to become a holy knight. He explains that strong desires pull the right things toward you, which is why she found that gem right there. That was fate. Onsko gets flustered when Liepin says they were drawn to each other, and Liepin adds that he couldn't fight like the others, so he chose to support people's dreams through crafting instead. He then hands over two freshly cut gems, a fire sapphire and a lightland, both glowing and scattering orange light as they fall. Onsko catches them with both hands, completely stunned. All three gems collected in just a few hours. She keeps telling herself it's a dream or some drug effect, because there's no way this is real. Even the legendary Holy Knight Elrond took 3 years for this trial. But the bigger problem is what she's feeling inside. She had sworn off boys completely and dedicated herself to Manaka. Yet here's this guy who found and crafted all 3 gems in one day, didn't try to use it as leverage, and even gave credit to his pet. She's never met anyone like this before. Now she finally understands why Manaka always talks about him with that big smile. Her heart's already gone. She decides she wants to give him something she's never given anyone and leans in close, pressing her lips to his with a quiet thank you. Right at that moment, a scream drops from the sky. Liepin snaps back and pushes Onsko aside. Before anyone can react, a small girl in a black hood, Shinobuko, falls straight down and lands on his stomach. He wheezes out a gaw and fold. Shinobuko says there was a black panther in the tree. Onsko calmly tells her that's just Tom, Liepin's pet. Shinobuko immediately leaps onto Onsko and clings to her like a koala. Onsko just strokes her head like it's totally normal, explaining that Shinobuko always does this when she gets scared. Shinobuko insists it's a ninja technique and nothing weird. After the chaos settles, Onsko looks down at Liepin and says she used to think he was useless, but she'll upgrade him to normal horse status now. Shinobuko makes a cheeky comment. Onsko threatens her with a lewd ghost, and Shinobuko immediately buries her face in Onsko's chest. Then Onsko pulls out a booklet of slave tickets, tears one out with a red face, and shoves it at Liepin, insisting it's just a small thanks and nothing more before walking off. Shinobuko, still clinging on, throws back a "next time we meet, we're enemies" as they leave. Liepin looks at the ticket and is shocked by the amount. He has no idea that this one ticket is about to set off something huge somewhere far away. Meanwhile, Principal Nekadrin is in the royal capital, over 4,000 kilometers away, giving a big educational achievement presentation at the royal palace. Reporters from multiple countries are there. She shows off the Academy's asset ranking board and reveals that Class 1-19 is sitting at number 1 with over 46 million in assets. The crowd goes wild. The rest of the rankings stay covered, and Nekadrin plays it off as protecting market-sensitive info. The real reason? Second place is the special training class, and she absolutely cannot let that get out. She smirks, thinking she's handled it perfectly. She also makes a mental note to cut ties with the vice principal soon, since he's been having violent meltdowns lately. Just as she wraps up the presentation, the ranking board behind her suddenly updates on its own. Before she can cover it, the special training class jumps to first place with 51.2 million. Nekadrin lets out a screech and the whole room sees it. Rewind a bit. Back at the academy, Nekadrin had been stressing over how to keep the special training class off the top of the rankings before the presentation. Then she heard that the vice principal got hit by some kind of divine punishment after trying to mess with the shrine that Class 1-19 had built. That gave her an idea, a donation box. She figured it'd be easy to rack up 40 million through donations, especially with Katon's popularity. But Katon flatly refused, saying the shrine's sacred object hadn't been placed yet and she wanted that to come from her master. Nekadrin didn't care. She waited for Katon and the girls to step away, then secretly set up a donation box at the shrine and told the male students that Katon really wanted slave tickets and might warm up to whoever gave the most. The guys went crazy throwing tickets in. They'd been wanting to give Katon something for ages. Nekadrin laughed watching it all pile up. Then she realized she needed to grab the box before Katon came back, so she told everyone to keep it secret and wheeled it away. During the event, the principal loses his mind and starts smashing the ranking board with a chair. This massive scandal hits the newspapers the next day, and the principal returns to school looking like a mess. When he gets back to his office, he finds the vice principal, who used to be a total yes man, sitting in his chair. the vice principal reveals that the Board of Education has demoted the principal by 2 ranks. Desperate to save his job, the principal begs for a way out. The vice principal offers a deal. If the principal pays 100 million yen to fix the rare magic board he broke, he'll only be demoted by 1 rank. The principal only has 50 million, so he decides to do something illegal. He sneaks into a warehouse to steal slave tickets from a donation box, planning to sell them on the black market. But just as he's about to take them, lightning strikes him as punishment. The tickets are burned to ashes and the principal is demoted anyway. Now, both the principal and vice principal are barely holding onto their jobs. Desperate to fix their reputation, they hear that a student named Wonsko from class 1-2 passed the first trial to become a holy knight. This is a huge deal that usually takes years. The duo decides to throw a massive party and take all the credit to boost their ranks. To make sure Liepin, the trash student they hate, doesn't ruin it, the vice principal orders guards to lock Liepin in his house. Liepin is confused but stays home. However, the guards are too scared of Liepin's giant guard dogs, Mark and Tom, to actually get close. When the vice principal tries to act tough, the dogs chase him away and rip his fancy tuxedo, leaving him embarrassed. The party starts, and it's a fancy event with VIPs and reporters. On stage, the vice principal and principal brag about how they trained Wonsko. But when Wonsko gets the mic, she tries to tell everyone the truth. She succeeded because of Liepin's help. The vice principal panics and makes a weird screaming noise to drown her out, causing glass to shatter. He then pulls out 2 slave tickets he bought with Wonsko's name on them. Using the tickets' power, he gives her a magical order. She is never allowed to say or write the name Liepin ever again. The vice principal laughs like a villain, thinking he has finally won and erased Liepin from the story. He plans to make Wonsko praise him instead, believing he has finally achieved total victory. However, the ticket actually refused the order because it was too extreme for its value. After desperate bargaining, the vice principal managed to get a tiny win, a ban on saying or writing the name Liepin for just 1 day. He even locked up Manaka and Katon in a soundproof room to make sure no one could ruin his moment. Wonsko felt crushed. He wanted the world to know how amazing Liepin was, but he couldn't risk the safety of his friends or his own status. Just as he was about to give up and finish his speech in despair, a massive whistling sound echoed through the air. Suddenly, the entire sky was filled with a giant glowing message that simply read, Liepin. Back at his farm, Liepin had been busy expanding his field. He heard the distant sounds of the ceremony and decided to send a congratulatory gift. He took some standard distress signal fireworks, which were originally meant for calling help, and used his fireworker and mana farmer skills to overhaul them. He stripped out the boring save me messages and redesigned the magic inside to create something spectacular. The result was a level 100 firework display that was unheard of in this world. The sky turned into a vibrant garden of shifting colors, with a black panther made of roses running through the clouds. The letters, "Congratulations, Wonsko." Liepin hung in the air, bigger and brighter than the sun. The audience went wild. Reporters started calling Liepin a legendary craftsman, and the guests were so impressed they wanted to invest in him immediately. The principal and vice principal were losing their minds with rage. In a desperate move to save face, the principal ordered 10 professional firework artisans to launch a fireworks battle to overwrite Liepin's name. The professionals fired everything they had, but their low-level fireworks couldn't even scratch Liepin's creation. It was like trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. The Liepin letters stayed perfectly clear, making the school's staff look like total fools. While the corrupt teachers and arrogant students were suffering in humiliation, Wonsko was jumping for joy, realizing his Prince Charming had come through for him in the coolest way possible. The impact of this stunt was so huge that it even reached the royal capital. In a glowing, heavenly room inside the palace, a group of powerful leaders met in secret. They were obsessed with maintaining their image, so they used high-level magic to wipe the memories of the guests and reset the reporters' devices. They wanted to erase every trace of Liepin's existence from the public record, proving they were willing to break any law to keep their trash student hidden from the world. However, the Board of Education wasn't happy with how the school handled the mess. A messenger in a sharp black suit arrived to deliver a brutal punishment to the acting principal, Nekodarin, and the vice principal, Yesman. Both were demoted by 3 ranks instantly. Nekodarin went from an A+ to a B+, and Yesman dropped from a B to a C, becoming a regular teacher. The 2 grown men broke down, crying and blaming each other. They even started a pathetic physical fight, rolling around on the floor until the messenger literally kicked them out of the office with a flying knee. Now outcast in their own school, the duo sat by a fountain, listening to students gossip about how cursed and smelly they were. Just as they hit rock bottom, a student named Weiss approached them. Weiss, a smart but shady guy, offered them a way back to power. He convinced them that Liupin was the source of all their bad luck. Under Weiss's influence, they decided to start a war against the boy. To carry out their plan, they declared a fake state of emergency, claiming the school was under threat. They shut down the teleportation gates, cutting the academy off from the outside world for a week. They even spent their personal fortunes and sold their mansions to fund this petty revenge. The 7 days of fire began. Liupin woke up early, noticing he had unlocked new skills like weapon destruction and helmet splitter under his axe butler job. As he tried to head to class, he found the residential area blocked by a wall of guards. These weren't professional soldiers, they were his own classmates, acting like the principal's personal goon. They were arrogant, thinking their steel armor made them invincible against Liupin's simple stone axe. When Manaka and Katon tried to run to Liupin, the guards got creepy, threatening the girls with physical exams since they now had the authority to do whatever they wanted. That was the final straw. Liupin didn't care if they insulted him, but he wasn't going to let anyone touch his friends. Rage took over. Liupin swung his stone axe with such force that it shattered a guard's steel helmet instantly, knocking the guy out cold. The other guards panicked. They couldn't believe a trash student with a rock could break high-grade metal. Terrified, the guards tripped over themselves trying to run away, looking like helpless turtles flipped on their backs. Liupin quickly told Manaka and Katon to go back and stay safe. He knew real guards would arrive soon. To make sure they stayed out of danger, he gave them a master's order to stay indoors, even pretending he'd stop being their teacher if they got into trouble. It hurt him to be stern, but with the school turning into a war zone, he had to keep them away from the coming fire. After dropping off the others, Liupin rushed back to his forest home, his heart racing. He noticed something strange. He was incredibly thirsty. Usually the school's unthirsty magic keeps everyone hydrated automatically, but the effect had suddenly vanished. Realizing the principal and vice principal were likely behind this as part of their state of emergency, Liupin headed to a nearby pond he had scouted earlier. When he arrived, he was shocked. The pond had been filled in with dirt, topped with a mocking sign that said, "Too bad." It was a death sentence. Humans can't last a week without water. Even worse, the local animals were gathered around the dry pond with looks of pure despair. They were losing their lives just because they were caught in the middle of the school's grudge against Liupin. Feeling responsible, Liupin promised the animals he would find a new source and headed deeper into the woods. While searching, Liupin leveled up and unlocked a rare job, Dowser. This gave him the ability to sense underground water using simple tree branches. He spent the next several days wandering the forest, barely surviving on morning dew and fruit. He gave every drop of moisture he found to the animals following him, becoming dusty and exhausted but refusing to give up. Back at the academy, the staff set up a giant magic screen to broadcast Liupin's struggle, hoping the students would enjoy watching him fail. The vice principal, Yesman, laughed as he watched Liupin wander, knowing he had personally ordered every water source to be blocked. But the plan backfired. Using his dowsing skills, Liupin found a hidden cave containing a massive treasure chest Yesman had hidden for his own favorite student. By opening it, Liupin accidentally completed a secret treasure hunt, instantly earning 100 million points and taking the top spot in the school rankings. The students watching the broadcast were stunned. Instead of laughing at Liupin, they started getting angry at the staff for rigging the game and calling the other classes trash. Ignoring the treasure, Liupin pushed on until he finally heard the splash of water. He ran toward the sound, hoping for a river, but found only a dry bed filled with dying fish. The school leaders had gone as far as blocking the river's source. Standing there was another giant billboard of the principal and vice principal laughing, holding a sign that once again read, "Too bad." Liupin didn't cry or beg for mercy like the principal and vice principal hoped. Instead, he smashed their "too bad" signs with a flying knee kick and set the pieces on fire. Using the flames, he started a bonfire and declared to the animals that they would find the river's source together. Even though the water was gone, the riverbed was full of flopping fish. Liupin grabbed a high-quality fish called a masan, grilled it to perfection, and enjoyed a delicious meal while his classmates watched through the screen, feeling incredibly jealous of his feast. Despite his cool act, Liupin was actually dying of thirst. He knew the school heads were watching, so he refused to show any weakness. When his water bottle finally ran dry, the vice principal mocked him, calling him a madman for thinking he could just make water. But Liupin used his survival skills to build a filtration device out of a wooden cup, sand, and gravel. He even tore the sleeves off his shirt to use as a filter. In seconds, muddy sludge turned into crystal clear water. He didn't even drink first. He patiently gave the water to the young animal, winning over the hearts of some students back at the academy who realized how kind he actually was. Liupin and his pack of animals pushed forward through the mud, heading deep into a valley where the air felt damp. They were exhausted, but the animals helped each other, with small ones digging out the larger ones when they got stuck. Suddenly, the ground started shaking violently. The vice principal had triggered a final, nasty trap. A mountain-sized boulder was rolling down the narrow valley, followed by a massive flood. There was nowhere to run. The crowd at the academy cheered, thinking Liapin was finally going to be crushed. Even his friends were screaming for him to run, but Liapin stayed calm and took a massive gamble. Just as the boulder was about to flatten him, a deafening explosion shook the area. When the dust cleared, the giant rock was in pieces and Liapin was still standing there, completely unhurt. A notification popped up in his vision. He had awakened a hidden skill from his jack-of-all-trades tree. By reaching level 8 and facing certain death, he unlocked absolute defense, immovable. He had literally tanked a mountain-sized rock and survived. While the principal and vice principal were busy celebrating his death, Liapin just coughed away the dust, wiped his face, and got back to work. Exhausted but determined, Liapin spotted a giant piece of driftwood. He used his crafting skills like never before, desperately carving the wood as the water surged. Just in time, he finished a mysterious wooden ark. He shouted for the animals to get on, and they all piled in as the raging current swept them away. The boat didn't just float, it soared over the water like it was flying. Once the water calmed down, Liapin pulled the shivering animals to safety. Everyone survived. As the rain fell, the forest began to heal. The dried-up rivers filled back up, and flowers started blooming again. Liapin realized that the flood had actually created a new river right in front of his house, making his farming life way easier. He said goodbye to the animals, feeling a bit lonely as they headed back into the woods, but he wasn't alone for long. Manaka and Katon ran to him, crying with joy and hugging him tight. His other friends, including Akemi and a shy Kurumi, were there too, relieved he was safe. Meanwhile, back at the academy, things were a mess. The principal and vice principal were losing their minds because their plan to kill Liapin had failed. Just as they were falling apart, Weiss stepped onto the stage with a full band and a fancy new robe. He acted like a hero, claiming he had known about the principal's evil plans all along. In reality, Weiss was the one who came up with the plan, but he betrayed the principal to save his own skin. He brought in the Board of Education, who arrested the principal and vice principal for treason. The two old men started fighting and blaming each other as they were dragged away in a cage. Back at Liapin's house, Manaka and Katon were still emotional. They told Liapin they didn't want to hide their feelings anymore. As a reward for Liapin being safe, they both leaned in and kissed him on the cheeks. At the same time, Weiss was enjoying his fake fame at the academy. The students, not knowing he was the real villain, cheered for him. Weiss felt like a genius. He had successfully shifted the blame and regained his status. Now, he was already planning his next move to take down Liapin for good. He even offered the crowd a special reward, the chance to kiss his cheek, though the reaction from the students was a mix of screams and pure disappointment. Weiss was desperate to regain his status. He stood on stage, ready to kiss two girls as a reward for their loyalty, but he soon realized nobody was looking at him. Everyone's eyes were glued to the sky, where a giant screen showed the hero, Liapin, getting kissed by two beautiful girls instead. Weiss lost it, screaming in frustration as his moment of glory was stolen by the guy he hated most. Meanwhile, the law finally caught up with the corrupt Principal Nekodarin and Vice Principal Yesman. They were put on trial for treating the academy like their personal playground and taking students hostage. The judge didn't hold back, sentencing them to a lifetime of hard labor at the Zamamisare's mine, a place no one ever returns from. As they were paraded through the city in a cage, the public turned on them, throwing trash and insults. Things got even worse when they passed their own family. Nekodarin saw his wife with another man, and she treated him like a total stranger, calling him a disgusting prisoner. Yesman's family was even more brutal. They actually threw stones at him, blaming him for ruining their reputation. With no friends or family left, the two former leaders ended up fighting each other inside their cage, completely broken. A month passed and Liapin was enjoying the peace at his base, but that didn't last long. A new principal named Kakeru and a vice principal named Delilah arrived. Kakeru looked like a rich, spoiled kid in a gold tuxedo, and he proudly announced that his profession was a gambler, even though being a gambler is usually seen as a cursed job. Kakeru claimed he was so good at it that he was the 10 billion yen man. Kakeru's first move was to announce a toast game. He offered 100 million yen to any class that would come on stage and drink grape juice mixed with a potion of oblivion. The catch: they had to agree to forget everything that happened in the last month, specifically everything involving Liapin. Most students, blinded by the money and wanting to fit in, jumped at the chance. They drank the juice and insulted Liapin, causing his class ranking to tank as their bank accounts grew. Liapin watched from the sidelines, annoyed that all the progress he made with these people was being erased by a potion. However, not everyone fell for it. When Class 1-19 was called, Katon stepped forward and flatly refused to participate. Other girls like Manaka, Akemi, and Kurumi joined her on stage, standing firm against the bribe. Kakeru tried to act charming, but his eyes were full of greed. He assumed the girls were just holding out for more money because, to a gambler like him, everyone has a price. He stared them down, ready to play a much dirtier game to get what he wanted. Kakeru is humiliated, but the vice principal Delilah jumps in to save him. She makes up a sudden rule. If 4 or fewer classes refuse to toast, the whole school is forced to do it anyway. Just when it looks like Kakeru has won, other classes start to rebel. A girl named Kalulu tries to speak up but gets nervous, while others from class 1-3 join in to support Liapin. Now that 5 classes have refused, the principal's new rule fails. Panicking, Kakeru and Delilah launch a new trap called the Liapin Millionaire Game. They bring out 10 treasure chests, promising 50 million yen for a win but a 50 million yen debt for a loss. He tricks Katon and Manaka into cooperating to help Liapin, which turns all 10 chests into winners. However, the moment they agree, Kakeru reveals his real trap. He didn't just bring 10 chests, he brought 2,000. He shuffles the winning chests into a massive sea of losers, making the odds nearly impossible. He laughs, thinking he's finally trapped Liapin in massive debt. But Liapin isn't an ordinary guy. Using his jack-of-all-trades skill, he has super sharp senses. He can see tiny differences in the chests like faded paint or rust that no one else notices. He even switches his job to treasure hunter, which gives him a special feeling whenever he's near something valuable. While the principal and the crowd celebrate his guaranteed loss, Liapin calmly walks into the forest of chests. He doesn't hesitate. He picks a chest and opens it. Jackpot. The crowd goes silent. He moves to the next one. Jackpot again. By the time he hits the 4th winning chest in a row, the schoolyard is covered in confetti and the fanfare is deafening. In less than a minute, Liapin has cleared 200 million yen. Kakeru's face turns pale. He realizes his plan has backfired and he's about to lose a fortune. He screams for the game to stop, running toward Liapin in a total panic. But Liapin just looks at him casually, reminding the principal that he was the one who said the game could go on as long as he wanted. With a calm smile, Liapin reaches for another chest, ready to bankrupt the man who tried to ruin him. The principal was a mess, crying and clinging to Liapin's legs. It looked like he was faking it, but Liapin felt a bit bad and decided to stop the cheers game. By the end, 14 classes had joined in, and though Liapin's rank temporarily dropped, he made a massive comeback. He ended up in first place with over 300 million ender, leaving everyone else in the dust. The principal was so stressed he could barely breathe and had to be dragged away by the vice principal. As Liapin stood there, his body started glowing. He had leveled up to 19. Looking at his stats, he noticed a new job available, gambler. Curiosity got the better of him, so he switched roles. Suddenly, his HP shot up to over 300 million. He realized the gambler job had a money-blood skill, meaning his current cash was now his health. It was a risky, cursed job because if he went broke, he'd literally die. Liapin headed home to work on his farm. He met a cat-like guy named Tom who was selling wheat grass and princess apple. Liapin bought them using a special grass cats love and went to his fields. While he was tilling the soil, he found a girl named Marchin digging a massive, unnecessary hole in the middle of his farm. Marchin was a student from class 1-9, the Merchant Alliance. She was energetic and boyish, and unlike most students, she hadn't actually drunk the potion to forget Liapin. She and her classmates had faked it because, as merchants, they knew information was valuable. She wanted to help Liapin because her class was being bullied by the richer Merchant Alliance from class 1-7, who were overcharging everyone for flour. Liapin agreed to let her sell his crops on one condition. She had to sell them at a fair price to everyone. Marchin happily agreed. To her total shock, Liapin used his mana farmer skills to fast-forward time. Right before her eyes, the seeds sprouted and grew into a massive golden field of wheat and sesame in seconds. Marchin was losing her mind, thinking Liapin was some kind of wizard. She wanted to grab the wheat and sell it immediately, but Liapin stopped her. He realized she didn't even know that wheat had to be turned into flour first. He sighed, realizing that despite her spirit, he still had a lot to teach his new business partner before they could take down the greedy merchants. Liapin was ready to start working, but Marchin was so hyped she wanted to begin that very night. Liapin convinced her to wait until morning since they needed gear. True to her word, Marchin woke him up while it was still pitch black outside, dragging him to the fields to start the harvest before the sun was even up. Liapin handed Marchin a stone knife to start harvesting the wheat while he headed into the forest. He had a map from his earlier travels and planned a gathering marathon to collect material. He spent hours running through the woods, filling his pockets with everything from wood to wild herbs. On his way back, he found his friends Mark and Tom in bad shape. Mark had a swollen, red nose from a bee sting, and Tom was limping from a leg injury. Liapin dug through his messy pockets and found a wild herb called sentataki. According to his ranger skills, this herb could heal wounds if ground into a paste. The problem was the name sentataki literally means 1,000 hits. Liapin had to grind the hard fruit in a mortar for an hour until his arms were sore just to make a small amount of ointment. It worked wonders, nearly healing his friends instantly, but Liapin knew he couldn't keep doing that by hand. He needed a way to automate the 1,000 hits process. He got a brilliant idea. a water wheel. Using his carpenter skills, Liepin quickly built a large workshop by the river. He installed 5 massive water wheels that used the river's flow to power mechanical pestle. Now, instead of grinding for hours by hand, the machines did the heavy lifting, producing high-quality medicine in bulk. Just as things were looking up, trouble arrived. A snobby noble student named Paper showed up with the principal and vice principal. Paper tried to pull a total scam, offering Liepin 1 kilogram of premium flour in exchange for his entire field of wheat. Liepin used his skills to check the flour and realized it was actually trash, coarse, tasteless, and full of husks. Paper, being arrogant, claimed birds would choose his gold flour over Liepin's garbage wheat. The principal turned it into a game. Whichever pile the birds chose would win and the loser would get slapped. Predictably, the birds ignored Paper's low-quality flour and swarmed Liepin's fresh wheat. When Paper tried to shoo them away, the birds attacked him. As Paper ran toward Liepin in a panic, Liepin delivered a massive slap that sent the noble flying face-first into his own pile of flour. Even after the humiliation, Paper wouldn't back down. He claimed Liepin was too stupid to turn wheat into flour and demanded that Marchin's entire class be forced into manual labor to process the field for the Merchant Alliance. It was clear the school officials were in on the scam, looking for any excuse to steal Liepin's hard-earned harvest. They didn't realize that Liepin had already built the technology to handle everything himself. As the flour started piling up, Liepin hit level 20 and unlocked a new skill called Skillful Toes, which basically gave him a second pair of hands. To keep the mill from overflowing, he quickly switched his job to seamstress and used his feet to weave straw bags out of the leftover wheat stalks while his hands kept the machine fed. Marchin was impressed and ran off to get classmates to help carry the finished bags. Seeing Liepin actually succeeding, Paper and the principal got desperate and tried to distract him with a game of rock, paper, scissors. The stakes were high. The loser gets slapped. Since Liepin's hands were busy weaving, he offered to play using his feet. Paper agreed, thinking he had an easy win because Principal Kakeru was standing behind him, using a gambler's skill to read Liepin's mind and signal the right moves. Every time Liepin thought of a move, Paper's choice changed instantly. Liepin realized they were cheating through a mental link, turning the game into a rigged trap. But instead of panicking, Liepin started cooking up a plan to use their own cheating against them. While this was happening, a girl named Marchin arrived with her group, the Merchant Alliance. They were stunned to see a high-ranking merchant like Paper kneeling and crying in front of Liepin. Usually it's the other way around, but Liepin didn't care about social ranks. Marchin was impressed by Liepin's strength and his amazing automatic milling machine. She decided to stop following the arrogant rich merchants and officially teamed up with Liepin to sell his flour. Principal Kakeru tried to bribe Marchin's class to hand over the flour, promising to raise their rank, but she stood her ground. She told him they had a deal with Liepin to sell the flour at a fair price to the common people. The Merchant Alliance loaded up their carts and left, leaving the principal and Paper fuming. Later, at a press conference in the capital, Kakeru tried to take credit for the flour production to look good. The reporters were amazed because getting flour this quickly in a new colony was unheard of. To keep up his cool image, Kakeru accidentally promoted Marchin's class and demoted Paper's class in front of everyone. This move backfired badly. The school's wealthy supporters were furious that he insulted high-ranking students and let valuable flour go to the poor. To fix his mistake and keep his job, Kakeru had to pay a massive 1 billion fine, making him hate Liepin even more. Meanwhile, Liepin's flour became a huge hit. He sold it for way cheaper than the market price, helping the struggling people in the residential area. He split the profits with the Merchant Alliance, earning a good amount for his own class. The next morning, Liepin went to his fields to harvest sesame. To his surprise, Manaka, Cotton, and a group of 20 girls from their classes were waiting for him. They were dressed in sports gear and eager to help with the farm work. Even though they looked like they had never touched dirt in their lives, Liepin gave them simple tools and let them help. The field was soon filled with laughter and hard work, making the atmosphere at his base feel peaceful and lively. Because so many people were helping, Liepin's base leveled up again. It transformed from a tiny, isolated spot into a normal-sized village. Even his pets, Mark the Bear and Tom the Black Panther, started helping with the chores. Thanks to a new base skill that helps pets work better, Tom began tilling the soil like a tractor, while Mark used a rake to level it out. Liepin even crafted special high-quality tools for them to make the job easier. Later, some students from the Tamer class showed up. They had previously made fun of Liepin but came to apologize and offer their help. When they saw a bear and a panther doing actual farm work, something thought to be impossible for animals, they completely lost it. They started calling Liepin a legend, and their respect for him caused the base to level up once more, turning it into a bustling settlement. Liepin realized that the more people he had around, the faster his base grew. He started thinking about inviting more friends to live there. Meanwhile, a shy girl named Kurumi, who is a talented pastry chef, was hiding nearby. She really likes Liepin and wanted to help, but she was too embarrassed to approach him because of how much she admires him. Liapin eventually spotted her and kindly invited her to join them. Another girl named Kalulu was also hiding in the trees with a high-end shovel, waiting for the perfect moment to accidentally run into Liapin. She had spent a long time fixing her hair and makeup, hoping he would notice her and ask for help. However, she felt a sting of jealousy when she saw Liapin walking back to the field holding hands with Kurumi instead. By noon, the group had grown to over 50 people. All this positive energy and hard work caused Liapin to level up to 21, and he even unlocked a new job, bread maker. Since everyone had worked so hard, Liapin decided to treat them all to a big outdoor lunch. He used his new skills to quickly prepare ingredients, starting with a special yeast made from apples. Using his fermentation skill, he managed to speed up a process that usually takes days into just a few moments, getting ready to bake fresh bread for his new community. When the bread came out of the oven, it was perfect. He had created Angel's Fluffy Bread, a crown-tier item so high quality that it actually made people float a tiny bit off the ground when they ate it. Kurumi was so happy she almost cried. Liapin noticed a limit penalty on the item's stats, realizing he was crafting things way beyond the level of even legendary royal craftsmen, but he didn't let it bother him for long. Outside in the fields, a snobby student named Paper was trying to show off his expensive sandwiches to Manaka, the saint, and Katon, the shrine maiden. He acted like his food was the best in the school, but the girls weren't interested. Suddenly, the amazing smell of Liapin's fresh bread filled the air. When Liapin arrived with the tray, Paper tried to talk trash, but he was silenced by how incredible the bread looked. The status gap between everyone disappeared as they all sat together to eat. The bread was so delicious that Manaka and Katon were practically worshipping Liapin, and even the pets of the other students went wild for it. Paper was so flustered that he accidentally dropped his expensive 500,000 yen sandwich basket into the mud. Even Liapin's trio of assistants, Onsko, Shinobuko, and Tomo, couldn't resist the bread, though they tried to act tough because they were still jealous about the girls kissing Liapin earlier. Life on the farm started getting much easier as more students began hanging out at Liapin's place to help with the work, creating a peaceful community. However, the peace didn't last. A new physical education teacher named Sir Vibe arrived. He was a hardcore military instructor who wanted to turn the students into soldiers. He immediately announced a survival trip to a lake. While the high-ranking students got luxury carriages and the others got basic ones, Liapin was singled out. Because he had beaten the previous teacher in a marathon, the school principal and Sir Vibe came up with a cruel game. They tied Liapin to the back of a carriage with a 400-meter rope. He was forced to run all the way to the lake without stopping. If he fell behind, he'd simply be dragged across the ground. This true hell marathon was clearly a trap, but Liapin remained calm as the carriage began to pull away. To make it worse, Kakeru made a bet. If Liapin reached the goal without collapsing, he'd get 300 million, but if he fell even once, he'd lose everything. Liapin had no choice but to agree. The teachers, including the vice principal and a mean instructor named Professor Sir, rode together on a horse to watch the show. Professor Sir even brought a crossbow, threatening to shoot Liapin if he slowed down. As the carriages started moving, Liapin's friends Manaka and Katon watched from the back carriage worrying about him. Liapin wasn't worried though. He used his special jack-of-all-trades ability to mess with his stats. He lowered almost everything to 1 and poured all his points into charm. While the teachers weren't looking, he disappeared into the bushes and used his massive charm to summon a herd of wild horses. Instead of running and getting dragged, Liapin came bursting out of the woods riding a majestic black horse, looking like a total boss. The teachers were furious. Kakeru tried to argue, but Liapin reminded him that the rules allowed riding wild animal. In a desperate move to make Liapin fall, Professor Sir began whipping the carriage horses to make them go at crazy speeds. The carriages started shaking violently, putting the other students in danger. To stop the madness, Liapin commanded his wild horses to knock the teachers off their ride. The teachers went flying over a cliff and landed in a messy pile at the bottom. Kakeru ended up at the bottom of the heap, and the impact was so hard it actually made his digital money fly out of him like game loot. He lost 200 million just from the fall. While the teachers stayed down there arguing and blaming each other, Liapin and the students continued to a nearby lake. At the lake, Professor Sir, who had climbed back up, announced a fishing challenge for lunch. He gave the rich students high-tech magic fishing rods, but gave Liapin's group nothing. Kakeru then doubled the bet to 600 million for a fishing battle between Liapin's team and the professor's team. Liapin didn't panic. He switched his job to woodcrafter and quickly crafted 50 high-quality handmade fishing rods for his friends using branches and special vines. Even though they looked simple, these rods were actually much better than the magic ones. With everyone armed and ready, Liapin switched his job one more time to a professional fisherman, ready to win the bet and feed his friends. Leo's mind suddenly cleared as his new fisherman skills kicked in. He could now see the best fishing spots on the lake like glowing targets. He led his team away from the noisy group led by Professor Sir, an arrogant teacher who always looked down on others. Leo took out some angel's fluffy bread he had baked earlier and threw pieces into the water. Manaka, his kind and loyal friend, was confused, but Leo explained this was chumming to attract fish. He then gave a quick lesson to the girls on his team, Manaka, Katon, and Akemi, who had never fished before. Using simple wooden branches and vines as rods, they cast their lines. Nearby, Professor Sir's students laughed at them. They were using expensive high-tech gear and couldn't believe Leo's trash equipment would work. But Leo used his fisherman's dance skill, and suddenly, every single rod on his team bent. They pulled up 50 large, healthy fish all at once. Meanwhile, Professor Sir's team hadn't caught a single thing because their gear was meant for the deep sea, not a lake. Suddenly, the Lord of the Lake, a massive shark-like monster, jumped out of the water. Kakeru, a rich and cocky rival, declared that whoever caught this boss fish would win the whole challenge. Professor Sir tried to use a giant mechanical rod, but he accidentally threw the whole thing into the lake like a piece of junk. Leo stepped up. Using his spring mist skill, he cast his simple hook over 100 meters away. The boss fish swallowed it instantly. The pull was so strong it nearly dragged Leo in, but he refused help, wanting a fair one-on-one fight. He used his skills to boost his rod's strength and tire the fish out. Just as the battle peaked, the teachers cheated. They launched a military ship with giant spears to kill the fish. They didn't care about the sport. They just wanted to win. The spears hit the fish, making the water turn red. Leo was furious that they ruined the fight. He tapped into his dexterous body skill, putting all his points into raw strength. With a massive shout, he pulled the rod so hard he literally yanked the giant fish out of the water and sent it flying onto the shore. The force was so great it caused the teacher's ship to flip over, dumping the three idiots into the lake. While the teachers struggled in the water, Leo went to find the boss fish in the woods. Manaka followed him. The creature was huge and dying. Instead of killing it, Leo asked Manaka to use her rare healing powers. She healed the fish, and Leo, using his maxed-out strength, dragged the giant creature back to the lake and let it go. As a thank you, the boss fish slapped its tail, sending over 1,000 silver fish flying onto the shore for Leo's team. It was a total victory. Leo then used his fisherman's cuisine skill to show everyone how to clean and grill the fish over a campfire. Even though it was just simple salt and fire, the skill bonus made it the most delicious meal they had ever tasted. Leo didn't stop there. He spent the afternoon turning the remaining fish into high-quality dried fish so everyone could take snacks home. As the sun set, Leo's team stood on the shore with their arms full of food, feeling like they had just experienced a miracle. They realized that with Leo, even a simple school trip could turn into something legendary. Liapin's classmates were moved to tears, realized that teaming up with him was actually fun and rewarding, unlike their time with higher-ranked students who just bossed them around. As they headed home happy and full of fish, the rest of Professor Sir Vibe's team was left behind starving, fighting among themselves, and cursing their luck. The day was a total disaster for Sir Vibe. His plan to break Liapin's spirit backfired completely. Not only did he end up in the infirmary, but he also wrecked a borrowed military ship, infuriating the army. As punishment, his rank was dropped from a to B, crushing his dreams of becoming vice principal. He spent his time in the infirmary thrashing in pain, eventually breaking his own bed and being forced to pay for it. The principal, Kakeru, had it even worse. In just one day, he lost over 1.9 billion yen due to various accidents and losing bets to Liapin. The stress was so intense that he started pulling his own hair out in clumps, officially earning him the nickname Hajiru-kun, Baldy. He vowed revenge, but like everyone else who messed with Liapin, he was currently losing everything. Meanwhile, Liapin returned to his forest base with 6 horses he found. This triggered a base upgrade, turning his settlement into a small farm. He spent his 3-day school break expanding his ranch. Using his taming skills and a handmade rope, he caught wild goats, cows, and chickens. His base level jumped again, adding a peace and security bonus that kept his animals healthy. The next morning, Liapin was woken up by his new chickens. They had already started laying eggs and his cows were ready to be milked. Excited by the fresh ingredients, he decided to cook a legendary breakfast. He smoked wild boar meat to make bacon, gathered wild greens for a fresh salad, and fried up the eggs using high-quality salt. Sitting down to a feast of bacon, eggs, fresh milk, and fluffy bread, Liapin realized he had finally achieved the comfortable life he always dreamed of. While his enemies were miserable and broke, he was living his best life on his rapidly growing farm. Meanwhile, back at the academy, things were a mess. The principal, Kakeru, was hiding in his office because he had gone bald from stress. He finally got a custom wig to hide his secret and was feeling a bit better until the vice principal dropped some bad news. The king had heard about a successful wheat harvest at the school and ordered a live TV crew to broadcast it to the entire nation. Kakeru panicked. The only real wheat field belonged to Liapin, the student he hated and tried to hide. If the cameras showed the field, everyone would see Liapin's success. Just then, Weiss, the arrogant student council president, walked in with a genius plan to steal the credit. Weiss suggested they show the wheat field from a distance so the reporters wouldn't see Liupin's house. To keep Liupin away, they sent him on a fake training mission with a tough teacher. For the food part, Weiss decided to use a secret stash of high-quality flour and asked a noble student named Toinette, who was a talented pastry chef, to bake a masterpiece loaf of bread. The plan seemed perfect until the cameras started rolling. Kakeru led the reporters to the residential area to look at the golden fields. The reporters were amazed, calling it a miracle harvest. Feeling cocky, Kakeru took them to the top of the school tower for a better view. But from high up, they saw something shocking. Someone had trimmed the wheat to spell out a name in giant letters. Leopin. It turned out a girl from another class had done it as a prank to support Liupin. As the reporters started asking who Liupin was, Weiss stepped in to save the lie. He told the cameras that Liupin was just a useless failure who was forced to do the harvesting, and that he was trying to steal the school's credit by carving his name. The reporters bought it, and suddenly the whole country started hating Liupin, thinking he was a low-life thief. Weiss was thrilled. He wanted to destroy Liupin's reputation completely. To finish the show, he took the reporters to a fancy cafe to eat the royal bread Toinette had made. The bread looked beautiful, shining like a jewel in a glass case. Weiss bragged to the cameras about how he ate this kind of luxury every day. But there was a huge problem. Toinette, who hated being forced to bake bread instead of cake, had filled the loaf with actual trash, dust, leftovers, and dead bugs. Weiss took a big bite for the cameras, and his face immediately turned pale. It didn't taste like bread. It felt like chewing on a dirty rag filled with garbage. He tried to act cool because the whole country was watching, but his body couldn't take it. He started tearing up and gagging. Finally, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He jumped up, ran to a nearby wooden bucket, and started losing his lunch in front of everyone. The genius wise man was now crawling on the ground, making gross noises into a bucket while the cameras caught every second of his humiliation. The reporters were confused and disgusted, realizing that the best bread in the world was actually making him sick. One reporter looked over at the leftover bread on the table, realizing something was very, very wrong. Weiss was so overwhelmed he actually passed out with his face in a bucket. While he was out cold, a heavenly smell of fresh bread started drifting through the air, leading everyone to a small bakery on the corner. This shop was packed. Two high-ranking girls, Manaka and Katon, were handing out samples. The reporters were shocked to see such important students working a counter, but the girls simply smiled and said they were doing it for Leo. They explained that this amazing bread, which tasted better than anything the king ever served, was made using a recipe from a student named Liupin. Manaka and Katon are from huge, powerful families, so seeing them both head over heels for the same guy sent the media into a frenzy. They even knelt before a sign of Liupin as if he were a god. They revealed that Liupin was the one who built the wheat fields and saved the community from starving. Kakeru, the hero who hates Liupin, tried to step in and kill the hype. He claimed the girls were lying just to make him jealous and called Liupin a useless loser. Since Liupin was away at a lake for remedial lessons, Kakeru thought he could trick the reporters before they left at noon. He challenged the girls to a bet. If Liupin could produce a full pioneer's breakfast within a month, he'd pay them 2 billion. If not, the girls would have to become his servants. Kakeru thought he had won because livestock farming usually takes a year to set up. But right then, a shy girl walked out of the bakery with a tray of steaming hot food. It was exactly what they were talking about, the pioneer's breakfast, made with ingredients from Liupin's secret ranch. The bet was over in seconds. Kakeru watched in horror as 2 billion drained from his account and flew into the girls' pockets. Manaka and Katon immediately used the win to officially form the Liupin Guard, a powerful new alliance that put them at the top of the school's wealth rankings. Even though Liupin wasn't there, his name was now the most famous in the kingdom. Desperate for a real interview with the man who beat the hero without even trying, the reporters started a mad dash toward the lake to find him. The lake was a total mess, looking like a dragon had just gone on a rampage, but Liupin was nowhere to be found. Reporters waited as long as they could, but eventually they had to leave without seeing him. Even though he was a total nobody before, Liupin had suddenly become a legend at the academy. Meanwhile, Weiss was left completely forgotten, face down in a bucket like a piece of trash until a rescue team finally picked him up. Because of the mess, his class got demoted to a lower rank. He wasn't the only one taking a hit. Toinette, a royal pastry chef who thought she was better than everyone, also got her class demoted after she served garbage bread that embarrassed the whole country. Then there's Kakeru, the guy in charge, who got in trouble for trying to steal credit for Liupin's work. He had to spend a massive amount of his own money just to keep his rank from dropping. Looking back at how this started, Liupin had just finished breakfast when Kurumi and her classmates from class 16 showed up. Kurumi was shy and asked Liupin for help, because their bread was coming out flat and tasteless. Liepin used his appraisal skill and saw their bread was terrible despite using expensive ingredients because they didn't know how to use yeast. He gave them some of his special apple yeast and taught them how to bake properly. The students were shocked at how much better the bread tasted, and after trying some bread Liepin had baked a week ago that was still delicious, they begged him to let them be his apprentices. This caused Liepin's base to level up, turning his farm into a training ground. While Liepin's new students were getting better, Toinette was having a meltdown. She had the best kitchen and the best flour, but she had no real skill. Her bread looked like a flat, crushed bug. Liepin had been banned from the main residential area for a week by Kakaru, so he spent his time patrolling the forest and expanding his farm. When he finally returned home, he found a huge group of people waiting for him by a bonfire. Manaka and Katon announced that they had officially formed the Liepin Guard with the principal's permission. Even though Liepin was technically unemployed, these girls from noble families didn't care. They told him they respected him more than any hero or king and wanted to serve him. Moved by their loyalty, Liepin officially accepted them as his comrades. This triggered a massive upgrade for his base, which transformed from a farm into a small village. Liepin himself gained the village head title, and his stats shot up, giving him the power to buff his followers and even kick people out of his territory. The next morning, Liepin woke up to a busy scene. The students from the Liepin Guard were already outside cooking breakfast. Inside his room, Manaka and Katon were waiting by his bed with big smiles, ready to help him get ready for the day. They washed his face, combed his hair, and fixed his clothes, fully dedicated to their new role as his supporters. After becoming the village head, Liepin's life changed overnight. His secretary, Katon, treated him like royalty, even helping him dress in his best coat. While the extra attention made him a bit uncomfortable, the rest of the village was just as hyped. At breakfast, the Liepin Guard gave him a hero's welcome, serving him a massive feast while the two beautiful secretaries, Manaka and Katon, literally tried to hand-feed him every bite. Liepin had to draw the line. He told everyone to relax and treat him like a normal person, or at most, a student council president. He didn't want to be a god, he just wanted to be their friend. Little did he know, his rival Weiss was spying on them through a magic device. Weiss was fuming with jealousy, scratching at trees in frustration because he felt that a jobless loser like Liepin didn't deserve such a perfect life. Back at the village, Liepin got to work on expanding their base. Since the group had grown to 70 people, they needed real houses. Liepin used his jack-of-all-trades skill to switch to a rare job, Mana Faker. This job was insane. It allowed him to use magic to create perfect copies of buildings and items instantly. With just a single log and some high-level magic, Liepin started printing houses. In less than 30 seconds, a full house with furniture and windows would just pop into existence. He even used a trick called proxy to turn cheap wood into high-end luxury timber. By sunset, he had built 30 luxury homes, a stable, and a massive gate with Liepin Village carved into it. What should have taken a week was finished in a few hours. The regular students at the academy were watching from the sidelines, absolutely miserable with envy. They were stuck eating crappy store food and living in crumbling shacks, while Liepin's village looked like a paradise full of food and happy faces. Up in the main school building, Weiss was losing his mind. He planned to use his power as student council president to destroy the village, but his streak of bad luck wasn't over. The principal and vice principal walked in, mocking him for being a national embarrassment. They told him he was useless and that even the jobless Liepin was better than him. The final blow came when a new student walked in, Weiss's younger brother, Pies. Pies was sharper, cooler, and clearly there to take over. He looked at his brother with total lost respect and told him the truth. Weiss was being kicked out of the school and disowned by their family. The wise man had officially lost everything, while Liepin had just started his own kingdom. Weiss was completely broken. His younger brother, Pies, had just revealed that he'd skipped grades and joined the student council, basically calling Weiss a disgrace. Before Weiss could even process the insult, the entire wall of the room was blown apart. Through the dust, the elite members of Class 1-11 appeared. Leading them was a small girl named Bakuin, a genius mage who talked like an old lady. She mocked Weiss, calling his luxurious room a pigsty. Pies joined in, telling Weiss that his classmates were real geniuses and didn't waste time talking to fakes. Weiss tried to stand his ground, but Bakuin didn't even give him a chance. Without saying a single word, she launched a massive explosion that sent Weiss flying out of the building. As he fell from the top of the castle-like school, he realized she had used high-level magic without an incantation, something almost impossible. Just as Weiss was about to hit the ground, a beautiful girl named Lovelin, known as the Great Saint, caught him with her magic. For a second, Weiss thought he was saved by a goddess. But Lovelin was cruel. She toyed with him, making him float and then dropping him repeatedly like a tea bag. She used a loudspeaker to announce a school trial to the entire student body gathered below. Lovelin called Weiss a fake and asked the students if they wanted him gone. Everyone raised their hands immediately. They were tired of his arrogance and how he had failed to help them. Loveland laughed, called him trash, and let him drop. Weiss was so terrified that he peed himself in midair, losing every bit of his dignity. When he finally hit the ground, the students didn't show mercy. They swarmed him and beat him up. A few days later, it was pouring rain. Liepin was heading home when his dog, Mark, dragged a soaking wet, unconscious body to the door. It was Weiss. He was covered in cuts and bruises, burning up with a fever, and looked nothing like the proud sage he used to be. Despite how Weiss had treated him in the past, Liepin didn't hesitate to help. He spent 16 hours straight brewing a special medicine from plant roots and stayed by Weiss's side to nurse him back to health. He even made a warm bowl of bread porridge to help him regain his strength. When Weiss finally woke up and realized Liepin was helping him, he felt ashamed and tried to turn away. Liepin sat by him and reminded him of a time when they were kids. Back then, Weiss had actually been kind and made soup for Liepin when he was being bullied. Liepin told him that he forgave him for the expulsion and promised to protect him now. Feeling the genuine kindness, Weiss broke down in tears. He grabbed Liepin's hand, crying and begging for forgiveness. The former genius sage was gone, replaced by a broken boy who finally realized who his true friend was. But even as he apologized, the memory of the cold, judging eyes of his classmates still haunted him, making him tremble with the weight of his mistakes. Liepin stood his ground, glaring back at the school's vice principal, Miss Mothers. She was a mean woman who wore sharp glasses and constantly looked down on poor students. She started screaming at Liepin, calling him a delinquent and claiming that kids from poor families have poor hearts. Liepin tried to explain that he was actually stopping some bullies from the hero class who were tearing the robes of girls from the Saintess course. But Miss Mothers didn't want to hear it. She cracked her whip like she was training an animal and insisted that the hero's classmates, who all came from rich, noble families, were telling the truth, while Liepin was the liar. She decided to punish Liepin by ordering the entire class to gang up on him. The rich kids jumped at the chance to suck up to the vice principal, while the poorer students felt forced to join in. Surrounded and scared, Liepin was pressured to get on his knees and lick her shoes to avoid a beating. Just as he was about to break down and apologize, a voice rang out from the door. "There's no need to apologize." Two large bullies were suddenly thrown into the room, beaten and crying. They immediately confessed that they were the ones who attacked the girls and Liepin. The person behind this was Weiss, a student who was perfect at everything, smart, handsome, and incredibly strong. Even the vice principal was intimidated by his presence. Miss Mothers tried to claim Weiss was being a wicked student for using violence, but Weiss calmly pointed out her hypocrisy. He stood by Liepin, telling him he had done nothing wrong. When the vice principal ordered the class to attack them both, Weiss didn't flinch. He took a boxing stance and warned everyone that he had just taken down two older students without getting a single scratch. Seeing how easily he handled the upperclassmen, the rest of the students lost their nerve and backed off. Later that day, Liepin thanked Weiss for saving him. They talked about a girl in the Saintess class who was being bullied by everyone, including the vice principal. Liepin felt bad for her because she was the only noble who was ever kind to him. Weiss teased him about having a crush, but then shared a secret. He had used a rare magical cloth that makes a person invisible to take down the bullies. Liepin thought it was a bit cowardly, but Weiss explained that using a rare item was worth it to protect a best friend. Their conversation was interrupted when they saw their kind homeroom teacher, Mr. Furo, being demoted to a part-time position. A flashy, arrogant new teacher from a noble family was taking his place. The new guy was already bragging about how he'd get rid of bad students like Liepin. Not wanting to let this slide, Weiss and Liepin teamed up to pull a prank. Liepin used his crafting skills to quickly build two powerful slingshots out of tree branches and stretchy vines. They crept through the bushes and used the slingshots to knock a massive beehive right onto the new teacher. Because the teacher was wearing strong perfume, the bees chased him relentlessly. He was stung so badly he had to be rushed to the infirmary, and his job was postponed, allowing Mr. Furo to stay as their teacher for now. The next Sunday, Liepin headed to a church in the slums before sunrise. He was hoping to see the girl from the Saintess class again. She had been crying the last time he saw her, and he wanted to find a way to make her smile, maybe by showing her the view of the city from the high trees. Liepin loved the girl's smile so much it made his heart light. On his way to see her at the cathedral, he took a detour to a riverbank, getting his clothes wet just to pick a massive bunch of wild flowers for her. He was excited and hurried his pace, but as he reached the slums, a little girl named Cornette, a younger orphan from the cathedral, ran out crying. She hugged him, sobbing that big sister was being kidnapped. Liepin dropped the flowers and sprinted to the cathedral gates. There, he saw a group of rough-looking bandits dragging the girl away. She was gagged with a sack over her head, struggling in her pure white robe. Enraged, Liepin charged at them, but he was just a kid against grown men. The bandits mocked him, easily slapping him aside like a piece of paper. Liapin wouldn't stay down. He kept getting up and rushing them, even as they kicked and punched him into the dirt. Eventually, a powerful kick sent him flying into a wall, leaving him bloody and barely able to see. In a final burst of desperation, he lunged like a wild animal and ripped the mask off one of the bandits. Furious at being seen, the unmasked man began stomping Liapin into the ground. To cover their tracks, the bandits forced a purple memory loss mushroom into Liapin's mouth, laughing that he'd forget everything by the time he woke up. Liapin eventually woke up in a kitchen, his body feeling like it was on fire. His friend Weiss, the son of a noble sage, had found him beaten in the street and brought him home. Weiss was trying to cook soup to cheer him up, though he was surprisingly bad at it. To help, Liapin gave Weiss some special red and yellow stones he'd found, which acted like a powerful flamethrower to start the stove. As they sat together, Liapin realized with horror that his memory was a foggy mess. He felt like something precious had been stolen, but he couldn't grasp the details. Weiss comforted him and gave him the soup, secretly revealing he had mixed in a legendary elixir, a priceless treasure from his father's vault. As Liapin drank, a rainbow glow covered his body, instantly healing every bruise and wound. The soup itself was a disaster, too salty, then too sweet, then too spicy because of Weiss's terrible cooking skill. Liapin saved the meal by adding chunks of stale black bread, a trick from the slums. The bread soaked up the mess and turned it into something delicious. As they finished eating, the fog in Liapin's head cleared. The memory of the kidnapping came rushing back. He told Weiss about the girl being taken from the cathedral. Weiss listened gravely and explained that this wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of something called saint hunting, a series of kidnappings targeting holy girls. Weiss kept his cool and stopped Liapin from doing something reckless. He looked at the two potions and realized this was a trap. If they drank the purple one, they'd forget the answer immediately. If they drank the green one, they'd be too sick to go save the girl. Both options were dead ends. Weiss turned to the alchemist and called her out. He realized the riddle wasn't about choosing a potion, but about testing their logic. He calmly explained that neither choice made sense if they actually wanted to use the information. The alchemist laughed, impressed that such a young boy could see through her game so easily. She admitted that she liked Weiss's sharp mind and decided to help them for real. She told them that the purple mushrooms only grow in a specific damp cave near the coast. This was the breakthrough they needed. Since the mushrooms were fresh, the kidnappers had to be hiding nearby. Weiss quickly connected the dots. The cave was close to a hidden pier used by smugglers. This matched his earlier theory about the kidnappers using ships to move their cargo to other countries. The saint hunt wasn't just a random crime. It was a planned business, and they finally had the location of the warehouse. Liapin was ready to run out the door, but Weiss reminded him to stay calm. They weren't just going against a few thugs. They were walking into a professional slave trading operation. They needed a solid plan to get the girl out safely before the transport ship arrived. With the location locked in, the duo headed back toward the coast. Liapin felt a mix of guilt and hope, realizing that his memory loss was a weapon used against him, but with Weiss's help, he was finally fighting back. They reached the cliffs overlooking the sea, spotting a suspicious ship anchored in the distance. The clock was ticking and the rescue was finally about to begin. Weiss and Liapin faced a tough choice. An alchemist woman offered them two potions, purple and green, as part of a riddle. Weiss didn't want Liapin to risk his life, so he took charge. He realized the trick. Drinking both potions at once would cancel their effects. He chugged them both, proving his point and impressing the woman. She revealed that the amnesia mushrooms grow on the mountain of forgetting mother. As they left, Weiss admitted he had a backup plan, a half-finished healing elixir just in case. He guessed that the kidnappers must live near that mountain. They headed back to town to prepare, but the next morning, Weiss's strict father confronted him. His father looked down on poor people like Liapin, calling them livestock, and demanded Weiss make Liapin submit to their family's power. Weiss played along to keep his father calm, but his heart was still set on the rescue. Meanwhile, Liapin spent the night building a pedal car out of scrap metal to reach the mountain faster. When Weiss joined him, they realized they needed better wheels. Weiss borrowed two high-quality wheels from their new teacher's carriage while the driver was napping. They assembled the vehicle and were about to leave when Coron, a young apprentice saint, tried to follow them. Weiss managed to convince her to stay behind and alert the guards if they didn't return by morning, making her feel like an important part of the mission. As they sped off, they accidentally ran over their new teacher, who was already late and stressed. They didn't stop, leaving the teacher screaming about his ruined carriage and stolen wheels. The kidnappers were bragging about how they had already shipped away the other saints and were planning to sell Kanoko to a far-off country. Weiss and Liapin didn't hesitate. They drove the pedal car straight into the barn, creating a cloud of dust, and snatched Kanoko in a daring move. They almost made it out, but the new teacher suddenly appeared in his two-wheeled carriage, blocking the exit. He thought the boys were just there to pull more pranks on his family's villa. This delay allowed the bandits to catch up. Now, Weiss, Liepin, and Kanoko were all captured and tied up. The bandits were shocked to see Liepin again, especially since they thought their hideout was a secret. The leader, feeling cruel, decided they would have a party while torturing the boy. Just as things looked hopeless, the confused teacher finally spoke up to the leader. The man who looked like a gardener was actually the leader of a kidnapping gang called the Saint Hunters. When the new teacher asked what he was doing at the family villa, the leader dropped a bombshell. The teacher's own mother, Vice Principal Mothers, was the one who ordered the kidnapping. It turns out she wasn't a respectable educator but a criminal who sold children from the slums and was now trying to suck up to a hero by kidnapping a high-profile saint named Kanoko. The news crushed the teacher. He fell to his knees, unable to believe his mother was a monster. The leader mocked him, calling him the family failure and a loser who only got his job because of his mother's dirty influence. Seeing the teacher's spirit break, the bandits decided to celebrate. They broke into the mansion, stole expensive wine, and started a wild party in the barn. Things turned ugly fast. A drunk bandit started brutally kicking Liepin, and when Weiss tried to help, they jumped him too. The bandits planned to kill the boys and throw them to the goblins to cover their tracks. But as they swung their final, heaviest kicks, the teacher suddenly threw himself over the boys, taking the hits meant for them. Even though he was terrified and his future was ruined, the teacher refused to move. He shouted that these kids were his students and more important than his own life. The bandits beat him mercilessly, but he held on like a shield, protecting the boys with everything he had. Eventually, the leader got fed up and delivered a massive kick that sent the teacher flying into a wall, knocking him out cold. The leader turned to grab the kids, but he froze. Weiss had completely vanished. Taking advantage of the confusion, Liepin slipped out of his ropes, which Weiss had secretly loosened earlier, and bolted into the woods. The bandits chased after him, but then they heard a voice from the barn. Weiss was already sitting on their pedal car with the kidnapped Saint Kanoko. Using a magical cloak to turn invisible, he had moved her while the bandits were distracted. Liepin jumped onto the car, but Weiss hopped off. He told Liepin to drive Kanoko to safety and alert the guards while he stayed behind to stall the bandit. It was a suicide mission, but Weiss knew it was the only way to save everyone. He watched his friend drive away, smiling because he had done his job. Left alone and surrounded, Weiss didn't show fear. He bluffed, acting like he was a powerful sage who had used teleportation magic. He told the bandits they were lucky to be alive, and for a second the thugs actually got scared and backed off. Weiss thought his plan was working and they might actually run away. But just as he felt a spark of hope, the gang leader walked out of the barn and started laughing, calling out Weiss's bluff. The bandit leader saw through Weiss's bluff, realizing he wasn't a powerful maid. He noticed that the magic flames were just a trick using flint and gunpowder. Once the secret was out, the bandits turned brutal, ganging up on Weiss and kicking him while he was down. The leader decided to keep Weiss as a slave instead of killing him, wanting to use his cunning nature for their crimes. Weiss was terrified, but he refused to submit, even with a blade pressed against his neck. Just as things looked hopeless, a mysterious voice echoed from the trees, telling Weiss he didn't need to apologize. Suddenly, soft nuts filled with a smelly green liquid started hitting the bandits from the darkness. The bandits tried to find the attacker, but the person was like a ghost, moving unseen through the forest. The leader realized this attacker was using the same disappearing trick Weiss had used earlier, and tried to force Weiss to reveal the secret. When Weiss couldn't answer, the leader threatened to end him unless the hidden hero showed up. To force the hero out, the leader started a countdown, pressing his knife into Weiss's skin. Suddenly, several large objects flew out of the darkness. They weren't rocks but beehives. At first, the bandits laughed because the hives landed far away, thinking the attacker had missed. But their laughter turned to pure terror when the bees didn't stay by the hive. Instead, the entire swarm turned into a massive cloud and rushed straight toward the bandits like a heat-seeking missile. The bandits tried to run, but there was nowhere to hide. The bees weren't attacking randomly. They were specifically targeting the bandits because of the smelly green liquid covering their bodies. The nuts thrown earlier weren't just for show. They were filled with a scent that made the bees go crazy and attack anything covered in it. While the bandits screamed and scrambled to escape the stings, a figure finally stepped out of the shadows. It was Liepin, the boy they had underestimated, looking calm and in control of the chaos he had just created. Weiss was trapped as a massive swarm of angry bees surrounded the forest clearing. While the bandits were being stung alive through the gaps in their armor, Weiss stood in the middle of the chaos completely untouched. Liepin showed up dressed like a bush for cover and explained that he sent their friend Kanoko to get the guards. Even though Weiss was a mess of emotions, Liepin stayed calm and reminded him to always think clearly to get the best results. By dawn, the guards arrived and arrested the bandits. It turned out the bandits had been kidnapping people, including saints from both rich families and the slums, but everyone was saved thanks to Weiss and Liepin's teamwork. Weiss's family and the school were so impressed that they recommended him for a prestigious 6-month top-tier training camp. Before leaving, Liepin gave Weiss a matching necklace as a symbol of their friendship, and Weiss promised they would be an invincible duo forever. However, 6 months later, Weiss returned as a completely different person. The training camp had twisted his mind. He now believed that the only way to make people loyal was to isolate them and make them feel truly lonely. He treated Liupin with total contempt, acting like a villain. But one night, after a heavy emotional breakdown where he cried like a child in Liupin's cabin, Weiss's dark side took over again. He convinced himself that Liupin's success came from a special black coat he wore, which Weiss believed was a legendary item made of dragon skin. Driven by jealousy and a need to regain his father's trust, Weiss decided to betray Liupin one last time. He set fire to the roofs of the village houses to create a distraction and stole the black coat, laughing like a madman as he rode away on a horse. He shouted that Liupin would go back to being a nobody without the coat's power. Liupin tried to warn him to stop, but not because he cared about the clothes. The truth was that the village houses were fireproof and the fire was just burning harmless straw. The real danger was the coat itself. It wasn't a legendary power-up. It was a failed, cursed replica that Liupin was planning to throw away. The curse made it impossible to take off, caused constant physical pain, and made the wearer take massive damage from even the smallest bumps. Worst of all, it granted immortality, meaning the wearer would stay alive to feel the pain even if their health hit zero. As Weiss rode into the night wearing the cursed garment, his arrogant laughter quickly turned into a scream of pure terror.